The entire kingdom had gathered to watch Caliph Draven reject the girl fate had placed before him, and no one in the royal court tried to hide their hunger for her humiliation. Elara Vale knelt at the center of the obsidian hall, with her wrists bound in ceremonial silver, her white claiming gown stained by ash from the dragon braziers burning along the pillars. Above her, the glass ceiling opened to a storm-dark sky, where dragons circled like living shadows, their wings carving through thunderclouds, as if heaven itself had come to witness her ruin. The court expected tears. They expected pleading. They expected the last nameless ward of a dead border house to break beneath the Dragon King's gaze. But Elara did not lower her head. She had been taught, long before hunger and exile and court whispers hollowed her life into silence, that some forms of dignity were the only inheritance no conqueror could steal. So when King Caliph descended the black marble steps toward her, crowned in iron and dragon bone, his cloak dragging behind him like spilled night, Elara looked up at him with trembling lips and dry eyes, and that was the first thing he hated about her. Not because she was proud, not because she was beautiful, but because somewhere behind her fear, he saw something that did not belong in a girl everyone had sworn was powerless. The claiming ceremony had begun at moonrise, when the dragon banners were lowered over the throne, and the royal priestess poured molten gold into the ancient basin of bonds. Every noble house had sent witnesses. Every commander of the sky legions stood in armor beneath the carved dragon skulls mounted along the walls. The ceremony was meant to confirm Lady Seraphine Morcant as Caliph's chosen queen, the perfect bride of old dragon blood, raised in luxury, trained in politics, praised for her flame, and adored by a council terrified of instability. Seraphine stood beside the throne in a gown of red silk and black pearls, her golden hair braided with tiny rubies, shaped like dragon scales. She wore the face of a woman born to be worshipped, but her hands were clenched too tightly around her jeweled fan, because the basin had not answered her. When the priestess asked the sacred flame to rise for the king's chosen bride, it had flickered once, gone pale, and died. Then, before anyone could speak, the dead flame had turned toward Elara. She had been standing at the edge of the hall then, where unwanted wards, servants, and lesser bloodlines were placed so they could witness glory without touching it. No one had invited her close. No one had expected her name to matter. She had come only because royal command required every woman of bondable age to attend the claiming, a cruel old law from the age when dragons chose blood before crowns did. Elara had kept her hands folded, her eyes down, her body still beneath the weight of 100 glances that had always treated her like a stain left behind by war. She was the daughter of House Vale, or what remained of it, a border bloodline burned out of history after being accused of treason 3 generations ago. The court called her a mercy ward because the palace had spared her life. They never called her what she truly was, a prisoner raised politely enough to be useful, but never free enough to forget who owned her. When the sacred flame bent toward her, silence struck the hall so sharply that Elara heard a dragon scream far above the palace. The priestess dropped the gold ladle. Lady Seraphine went white. The counselors rose from their carved seats, and Caliph, who had been watching the failed ritual with the cold patience of a king accustomed to disappointment, turned his head slowly toward the forgotten girl at the back of the court. Their eyes met across the hall. His were not merely dark. They were black, with a ring of molten amber around the pupil, dragon eyes forced behind a human face. Elara felt the bond before she understood it. Not warmth, not tenderness, not the soft pull sung about in temple hymns. It was a blade of heat through her ribs, a chain thrown around her heart, a terrible recognition that stole the breath from her lungs. The king felt it too. She saw it in the moment his fingers curled against the arm of his throne, hard enough to crack the obsidian. Then the whispers began. Not possible. Not her. Not Vale blood. Not that girl. Lady Seraphine moved first, stepping down from the throne platform with a smile so delicate it was more dangerous than rage. There has been contamination in the basin, she said softly, but the softness carried. The ward was near the ash braziers before the ceremony. Perhaps she touched something she did not understand. Elara wanted to answer, but the court had never rewarded her for defending herself. Every time she had spoken truth, someone with a better name had turned it into insolence. So she stayed still, even as guards moved toward her. The priestess recovered her composure and lifted one trembling hand. "The flame does not bend falsely." "No," Seraphine replied, her gaze fixed on Elara. "But forbidden blood does." The word forbidden slid through the hall like poison. Elara felt the old wound open inside her, the one carved there since childhood. She had been raised beneath stories of her family's disgrace, fed on warnings that kindness toward her was generosity, not obligation. She had been allowed books, but not inheritance, lessons, but not status, rooms, but not belonging. Her blood had always been a locked door others pointed at when they wanted to frighten children. Now that same blood had apparently reached across the royal court and touched the Dragon King's flame. Caliph rose. The movement alone crushed the whispers. He was taller than any man in the room, broad-shouldered beneath black ceremonial armor, etched with old runes, his face carved with the merciless beauty of a ruler who had outlived mercy. He had inherited the throne at 23 by killing the uncle who tried to feed him to his own dragon. He had broken 3 rebellions, burned 2 rival courts, and forced the Northern Sky clans to kneel after a winter siege that turned the mountains red. No one called him kind. No one called him safe. They called him immortal because every wound closed on his body before the blood reached the floor. They called him Ash Crown because his dragon, Varen, had once burned an entire battlefield into glass at his command. And now that feared king walked toward Elara, as if each step cost him control. The guards seized her arms and dragged her from the edge of the hall to the center. Someone laughed nervously. Someone spat the name Veil. Elara's knees struck the marble hard enough to send pain up her thighs, but she did not cry out. She stared at the reflection of the dragon braziers in the polished floor and reminded herself that pain was temporary. Shame lasted longer only if one accepted it. Caliph stopped before her. The bond tightened. For one impossible moment, the court vanished. Elara heard only the low, uneven sound of his breathing and the distant thunder of wings above the palace. His expression did not soften, but something moved behind his eyes. Recognition, fury, fear, and a hunger he immediately buried beneath command. "What is your name?" he asked. The question struck harder than the guard's hands. He knew. Everyone in the palace knew. They had made sure she never forgot the weight of it. "Elara Vale, Your Majesty." A ripple passed through the nobles. Vale, traitor blood, dead house, ashline filth. Kaelith's jaw tightened. The priestess stepped forward, voice cautious. "My king, if the flame has chosen, it has chosen nothing," Caliph said. The hall went still. Elara felt the words before she understood them. A blade, clean and public. Entering the one place she had not known was still vulnerable. Caliph looked down at her, and whatever had passed between them disappeared behind the iron wall of his face. The throne of Draven does not bind itself to a fallen bloodline. The priestess inhaled sharply. Seraphine's smile returned. Elara's fingers curled against her gown, but she forced herself not to flinch. She had imagined cruelty before. She had survived it in quiet rooms, in corridors, in winter courtyards where noble girls practiced flame, and made her stand close enough to feel the heat but never close enough to belong. But this was different. This was not dismissal. This was erasure before an entire kingdom. Caliph turned to the court. The anomaly will be judged. Until then, Lady Seraphine remains the intended queen. The word anomaly landed on Elara's skin like a brand. Seraphine stepped closer, her perfume sweet as poisoned wine. "For the safety of the realm," she said, "the ward should be bound. If her blood has interfered with the right, there may be more corruption hidden beneath it." The council agreed too quickly. Fear did that to powerful men. It made them eager to punish whoever stood closest to the unknown. The royal priestess hesitated, but Kyleth gave no order to stop them. Silver chains were brought from beneath the altar. Elara had seen them only once before, during the execution of a Sky Clan rebel whose dragon had turned against the crown. The chains were ancient, forged to suppress dragon fire and blood magic. They were not meant for a girl who had never sparked so much as a candle. When the first cuff closed around her wrist, cold bit into her bones. When the second tightened, the hall darkened at the edges. She kept her mouth shut, even as the metal burned. Kyleth watched. That was what broke something in her. Not the court, not Seraphine, not the counselors whispering about treason and blood rot. Him, the man whose soul had touched hers across the room with the force of destiny, now standing like a statue while they chained her as if she were a threat. Elara lifted her eyes to him. "Did you feel it?" she asked quietly. A dangerous silence followed. Kyleth's face did not change, but his dragon eyes flared. Seraphine's fan snapped shut. "How dare you speak to the king as if—" "I asked him," Elara said, still looking at Kyleth. The guards tightened their grip hard enough to bruise. For a heartbeat, Kyleth said nothing. Then he leaned down, bringing his face close enough that only she could hear the low, brutal answer. "Yes," he said. "And that is why you should fear me." The words should have ended whatever fragile hope had risen in her chest. Instead, they opened a question so terrifying she forgot the pain in her wrists. Why would a king fear his own mate? Before she could ask, the western doors exploded inward. The first assassin came through the smoke with a curved bone blade in each hand. The second dropped from the ceiling beams. The third wore the armor of Kyleth's own sky guard. For one stunned second, the court could not understand that death had entered during a sacred ceremony. Then, the screaming began. Nobles scattered. Guards drew steel. Dragons shrieked above the glass ceiling, as if something in the air had wounded them. The braziers flared red, then black. Kyleth moved like violence given human form. He caught the first assassin by the throat and crushed him against a pillar. The second blade struck his shoulder and snapped against his armor. Varen roared somewhere above the palace, and the sound shook dust from the rafters. But the third assassin did not run toward the king. He ran toward Elara. She saw the blade too late. The guards holding her had turned toward the chaos. The silver chains trapped her hands. She tried to twist away, but the assassin's eyes were fixed on her with a hatred too precise to be random. This was not a failed attack on the king. This was a message, a removal, a secret being buried before it could be named. The blade came down. Kyleth shouted something, but the sound vanished beneath a roar that did not come from any dragon in the sky. Heat burst through Elara's veins. Not red, blue. It erupted from her bound wrists in a ring of impossible flame, cold at its heart and white-hot at its edges. The silver chains did not melt. They screamed. The assassin's blade shattered before it touched her skin. Every dragon above the palace shrieked at once, a sound of ancient terror that turned the blood of every noble to ice. The glass ceiling cracked. The sacred basin overturned. Blue fire spiraled around Elara like a storm remembering her name. For the first time in his reign, King Kyleth Draven looked afraid. And Elara, still kneeling in the center of his court, realized the fire had not come to save him. It had come to warn him. The scream of the dragons did not stop when the blue fire vanished. It echoed across the palace towers, through the mountain cliffs beneath the capital, and into the storm-black sky, where the royal beasts circled in visible panic. One of them crashed against the outer spires hard enough to shake the entire court. Another fled into the clouds as though something ancient had risen from the grave below the kingdom. And in the center of the ruined claiming hall, Elara Vale remained on her knees with smoke curling from her skin. No one moved toward her. The silver chains around her wrists had blackened into cracked ash. Tiny blue embers crawled across the marble beneath her like living veins before fading into darkness. The assassin who had tried to kill her lay several feet away, his armor split open, his body untouched by ordinary burns. There was no blood. Only strange, pale fractures spreading beneath his skin, as though his bones had frozen from the inside. The royal priestess stared at the corpse and whispered something in the old dragon tongue. Fear. Real fear. Not fear of rebellion. Not fear of assassination. Fear of prophecy. The court felt it immediately. The nobles began stepping backward. Several guards dropped to one knee without understanding why. Lady Seraphine's face lost all color beneath her painted elegance. "No," she breathed. "That flame died centuries ago." Elara barely heard her. The world had narrowed into heat and dizziness. Her chest hurt with every breath. Something inside her body had awakened too violently, clawing against her ribs as if it had slept there for years, waiting for blood and terror to call it awake. Her skin burned. Her veins pulsed with blue light beneath the surface for brief, terrifying moments before dimming again. Then Caliph crossed the hall toward her. Every instinct in the room reacted. The guards tried to stop him. "My king, do not touch her," the priestess snapped suddenly. The words struck the court silent. Caliph halted only a few feet from Elara. His black ceremonial cloak dragged through ash and shattered glass, but his eyes never left her face. She could feel his dragon fighting beneath his skin now. She had not understood it earlier, but she did now, the terrifying pressure in the air around him, the violent heat rolling from his body, the way the shadows behind him trembled when his control slipped. He was not afraid of her power alone. He was afraid of what his dragon recognized. Elara forced herself upright despite the pain twisting through her muscles. The entire court watched her as though she might explode again. She hated that look. She had spent her life invisible, and now every eye in the kingdom suddenly saw her too clearly. "What am I?" she whispered. No one answered. Caliph's gaze flicked briefly to the dead assassin before returning to her. "Take her below the west tower." The command snapped through the hall instantly. Several guards hesitated. "My king," one said carefully, "the western cells are reserved for—" "I know what they are reserved for." His voice dropped low enough to freeze the room. "The western tower." Even Elara knew what existed beneath it. The ash vaults, ancient prison chambers carved deep beneath the palace, where dragon blood criminals, cursed relics, and forbidden creatures were hidden from the kingdom. No servant spoke of the place above a whisper. Some believed monsters slept beneath the tower. Others claimed the screams heard there during storms belonged to dragons too dangerous to kill. Seraphine stepped forward sharply. "You cannot lock her beneath the palace alone. If the blue flame truly survived—" Caliph turned his head slowly toward her. The movement alone silenced her. "That is exactly why she will remain where I can see her." The words should have sounded protective. Instead, they sounded like a threat. Elara's stomach tightened, because for the first time since the flames erupted, she understood something terrible. Caliph was not looking at her like a man who had discovered salvation. He was looking at her like a king, standing before the weapon prophecy promised would one day kill him. The guards approached carefully this time. No one touched her skin directly. Heavy black gloves were brought from the ceremonial armory before they dared take hold of her arms. Elara allowed them to lead her through the ruined hall, while the court parted around her in silence. Not pity, not hatred. Fear. Pure fear. Above the shattered ceiling, dragons still screamed. As she passed the throne platform, Seraphine caught her wrist suddenly. The movement was hidden beneath the folds of royal silk, invisible to most watching eyes. But Elara felt the woman's nails dig sharply into her skin. "You should have died with your bloodline," Seraphine whispered. Then she smiled again, before anyone noticed. Elara said nothing. Yet somewhere deep beneath her ribs, the strange blue heat answered. The descent into the ash vaults took them below the palace foundations, beneath torchlit corridors and ancient dragon statues whose eyes seemed to follow her through the dark. The deeper they traveled, the colder the air became. By the time they reached the final gate, frost coated the stone walls despite the fire veins running through the mountain. Caliph followed the entire way, silent, watching. The guards stopped before a massive iron door, carved with old warning runes. 2 dragon skulls were embedded into the stone beside it, their hollow eyes glowing faintly red. One guard swallowed hard. "No prisoner has entered this chamber since the Hollow Wars. Open it," Caliph ordered. The locks turned slowly. Ancient chains groaned. The door opened inward with a sound like something waking. Elara expected darkness. Instead, she found a chamber, unlike any prison she had imagined. A circular room of black stone spread beneath a domed ceiling painted with faded constellations. Old dragon bones lined the walls beside shelves of forbidden relics sealed behind silver barriers. At the center stood a raised platform surrounded by glowing runes, and above it hung broken chains thicker than a man's arm. The room smelled faintly of ash and dragon blood. Caliph dismissed the guards immediately. None argued. The iron door shut behind them with brutal finality, leaving only silence and distant thunder overhead. Elara stood motionless near the entrance. Caliph remained several feet away. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he removed his crown. The motion startled her more than the flames had. Without the iron crown, he looked less untouchable somehow. More dangerous. Dark hair fell loosely across his forehead. A thin line of blood traced from beneath the broken armor near his shoulder, where one assassin blade had pierced deep enough to wound him. But the wound was already healing. The flesh closed slowly before her eyes. Immortal. The stories had been true. Caliph noticed her staring. Most people try not to look when that happens. I have never seen someone survive steel through the heart. His expression darkened slightly. You think immortality is survival? The question lingered heavily between them. Elara looked away first. Caliph crossed toward a table lined with old scrolls and crystal vials. Sit. She remained standing. I am not your prisoner yet, she said quietly. Something sharp flickered through his eyes then. Not anger. Interest. You believe there is still a version of this night where you walk free? No. Elara swallowed carefully. But I would like to pretend for a few more minutes. To her surprise, Caliph almost smiled. Almost. Then it vanished. He picked up a black cloth and pressed it against the wound in his shoulder. Blood stained the fabric dark red before slowly stopping. Even immortal healing seemed slower tonight. The realization unsettled her. The blue fire had harmed him somehow, or frightened the dragon inside him enough to weaken it. Caliph finally looked directly at her again. Tell me what happened. I do not know. The flame answered you. I did not summon it, but it came. His voice sharpened. Elara flinched, despite herself. Not because he yelled, because part of her wanted him to believe her. That weakness terrified her more than his anger. She folded her hands tightly to hide the trembling. All my life, nothing has answered me. Not magic, not dragons, not even the bond stones during winter rites. I thought. Her throat tightened. I thought whatever lived in my blood died with my family. Caliph went still. Something in those words reached him unexpectedly. What do you remember about Housevale? He asked. Elara laughed once, softly and without humor. That depends which version you want. The official story or the truth whispered by drunk servants after midnight. The truth. Her gaze lowered briefly. When I was 6, our estate burned. The memory returned with cruel clarity. Snow turning black with ash, screaming in the dark, dragon fire swallowing towers whole. They said my grandfather betrayed the crown during the border wars. That Housevale tried to raise forbidden fire against the dragon throne. She swallowed. Everyone died except me. Caliph's jaw tightened. And no one told you what forbidden fire meant? No. Did you never question why the court kept you alive? Elara met his eyes then. Every day. Silence stretched again. Caliph walked toward the center platform, where ancient runes glowed faintly beneath his boots. He looked older suddenly. Not in body. In exhaustion. The Blue Flame clan nearly destroyed the Dragon Kingdoms 800 years ago, he said quietly. They carried fire capable of killing immortals. Elara's pulse slowed. No dragon can truly die from ordinary flame. Even if the body falls, dragon blood regenerates. His voice darkened. Blue fire burns differently. It devours the soul beneath the flesh. A chill slid through her spine. She remembered the dead assassin's frozen fractures. Caliph continued. The ancient kings hunted the blue flame bloodline into extinction. Every child, every heir, Every dragon bonded to them. Elara stared at him. "And yet," he said softly, "you survived." The chamber suddenly felt too small, because she understood now. Not anomaly, not accident. Execution. Her family had not been erased for treason. They had been slaughtered because the throne feared them. The realization hollowed something inside her chest. Calith watched the truth settle into her face, and for the first time since the claiming ceremony, regret flickered openly across his expression. Not enough to undo the rejection, but enough to wound him with it. "You knew," Elara whispered. His silence answered her. "When the flame chose me." Her voice trembled now despite every effort to steady it. "You already knew what I was, I suspected, and you still chained me before the court." The accusation landed heavily. Calith stepped closer. "You do not understand what would happen if they believed the prophecy had awakened." "What prophecy?" His eyes darkened. For a moment he looked almost monstrous beneath the torchlight. Then he spoke the words quietly. "The Dragon King will fall to the woman carrying blue fire." The chamber went cold. Elara's breathing stopped, and somewhere deep in the mountain beneath them, something ancient growled in the dark. The growl beneath the mountain did not sound entirely like a dragon. It was deeper, older. The stone floor beneath the ash vault trembled once, just enough to rattle the silver relics sealed along the chamber walls. Elara instinctively stepped backward. Calith's head lifted immediately toward the darkness beyond the iron corridors, his expression hardening into something battle-ready and dangerous. Then the sound stopped. Silence returned, but not peace. Elara realized the king's hand had moved to the sword at his side before the growl had fully faded. Fear touched her unexpectedly. Then not fear of the thing beneath the palace, but fear of how familiar Calith seemed with it. "You keep monsters under the mountain," she said softly. Calith did not look at her. "Every kingdom does." That was not an answer. No. His gaze remained fixed on the distant corridor. It was a warning. The torch flames dimmed briefly. Blue heat flickered beneath Elara's skin again. Calith noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed. "Your fire reacts to the lower chambers. I cannot control it. That no longer matters." His voice carried exhaustion now. Not cruelty, not even suspicion. The exhaustion of a man watching disaster approach exactly as prophecy promised. Elara hated that part of her, still wanted him to look at her differently. Not as a curse. Not as a weapon. As a person. The realization angered her enough to steady her voice. "If you believe I am destined to kill you, why not finish what your ancestors started?" Calith finally looked at her fully. For one dangerous second, the dragon beneath his skin surfaced. His pupils narrowed into burning slits. Heat rippled through the chamber hard enough to sting her face. "You think I have not considered it?" The words landed like a blade, yet he still had not drawn his sword. Elara forced herself not to retreat. "Then why haven't you?" Something unreadable crossed his expression. Then footsteps thundered beyond the chamber doors. A sharp knock echoed through the iron vault. "My king," came a guarded voice from outside. "The council demands immediate audience." Calith closed his eyes briefly. Not fear, annoyance. He looked toward the sealed door, as though the entire royal council had become a personal inconvenience. "Wait outside," he ordered coldly. "My king," the northern delegates witnessed the fire. "Rumors are already spreading through the capital. Lady Seraphine requests." "I did not ask what Lady Seraphine requested." Silence answered immediately. The messenger retreated. Calith exhaled slowly before turning back toward Elara. "You cannot leave this chamber. I already understood that." "No." His gaze sharpened. "You truly do not." He walked toward the shelves lining the curved walls and pulled aside a dark cloth covering one of the sealed relic cases. Inside rested an ancient dragon skull, split directly down the center by a burn mark, glowing faintly blue, even after centuries. Elara froze. The fracture looked almost identical to the cracks spreading beneath the assassin's skin upstairs. This dragon belonged to the last king who tried to exterminate the blue flame bloodline, Calith said quietly. He died screaming in front of his court while blue fire consumed his soul from the inside. Elara stared at the skull. The kingdoms never recovered from that war. Entire dragon clans vanished. Caleth's voice lowered further. When your flames erupted tonight, every dragon in the capital felt it. A terrible understanding settled into her chest. That is why they screamed. Yes, her throat tightened. Not because she wanted power. Not because she enjoyed frightening them. But because, for the first time in her life, she understood why people had looked at her with hidden unease even before tonight. Why servants crossed themselves after touching her belongings. Why noble children avoided her during moon festivals. Why older council members sometimes fell silent when she entered a room. Some part of the kingdom had always remembered. Even if she had not, Caleth covered the skull again. The court will demand your execution by sunrise. Elara laughed softly under her breath. Not from humor, from exhaustion. Then why am I still alive? The answer came too slowly. Because I have not decided whether killing you saves my kingdom. His eyes lifted toward her again. Or destroys it. The bond tightened painfully between them. Elara hated how deeply those words struck her. Because beneath all his control, all his coldness, she could hear the truth hidden there. Caleth did not want her dead. That frightened him more than the prophecy itself. Before either could speak again, the torches along the chamber walls suddenly flared bright blue. Both froze. Ancient runes beneath the floor awakened one by one, in glowing circles around Elara's feet. The air thickened instantly with pressure. Dust lifted from the stone. Somewhere far above them, dragons began roaring again. Caleth moved toward her immediately. Do not touch anything. I am not doing this. I know. The runes spread outward like veins of living light. Then, one of the relic doors shattered. A pulse of blue fire exploded through the chamber hard enough to knock Elara backward. Caleth caught her before she struck the floor. Heat slammed into both of them violently, and the moment his hand touched her skin, the world stopped. Elara gasped sharply. Images crashed through her mind. Fire, snow, blood staining white marble. A dragon larger than mountains screaming beneath a black sky. A younger Caleth, kneeling beside a dead woman wrapped in silver. Cha, a throne room burning, and a voice whispering through flame. If he bonds to her, the kingdom falls. The vision vanished instantly. Elara staggered against him, breathless. Caleth released her so quickly it almost looked painful. His face had gone pale. You saw something, he said. So did you. Neither moved. Neither denied it. The bond between them pulsed again, stronger now, no longer merely emotional but magical. Something ancient had recognized their contact. Caleth stepped backward first. A mistake. Because distance did not weaken the connection anymore. Elara could still feel him. The restrained violence beneath his control. The exhaustion. The constant burning beneath his skin. And underneath all of it, loneliness. The realization unsettled her enough to look away. Caleth's jaw tightened. The bond is accelerating. You rejected it. I know what I did. His voice sharpened unexpectedly. For the first time since meeting him, anger cracked through his perfect control. Not at her, but at himself. Before Elara could answer, another knock thundered against the vault door. This time, the voice belonged to Seraphine. My king, she called smoothly. The council grows impatient. Caleth's expression hardened instantly. Leave. I only wish to help. I said leave. A pause followed. Then Seraphine spoke again, softer now. The northern sky clans already know the blue flame has awakened. Silence fell inside the chamber. Even Caleth went still. Seraphine continued carefully. Their dragons have begun abandoning the mountain borders. If the rumors spread before dawn, panic will destroy the trade cities within days. Elara felt cold suddenly. Because the woman was right. The dragon kingdoms did not merely fear blue fire. They remembered it. Caleth moved toward the door but stopped before opening it. You should not be here. And yet, I am the only one thinking clearly. Something dangerous entered her tone then. The council will force your hand eventually. If the girl lives, every rival throne will believe the prophecy has returned. A pause. You know what your father would have done. At that, Calith's expression darkened violently. The air temperature rose instantly. Elara sensed she had touched a hidden wound without understanding it. My father, Calith said coldly, burned children alive to protect his crown, and the kingdom survived because of it. The silence afterward felt murderous. Then, Seraphine delivered the final strike. If you cannot kill the blue flame heir, she whispered through the iron door, someone else will. Footsteps retreated down the corridor. Calith remained motionless. Elara studied him carefully now. Not the king. Not the legend. The man. Something had changed in his face the moment Seraphine mentioned his father. Blind. Olra. Fear. And suddenly Elara understood something terrible. Calith did not fear becoming weak because of her. He feared becoming his father. The realization unsettled her more deeply than the prophecy. She looked toward the glowing runes still pulsing faintly beneath the floor. What really happened to the Blue Flame clan? Calith stayed silent for several seconds. Then he answered quietly. My father exterminated them. The chamber felt colder instantly. He hunted every surviving house after the rebellion ended. Women, children, dragon riders. Calith's voice remained controlled, but something ugly moved beneath it. The crown claimed it was necessary. And you believed them? No. The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Elara's breath caught. Calith looked toward the dark ceiling overhead. I was 14 when I watched the executions. The torchlight sharpened the harsh angles of his face. There was a girl younger than me. His jaw tightened faintly. She begged my father to spare her brother. He burned them both alive instead. Something inside Elara twisted painfully. Calith's gaze lowered slowly toward her. I can still hear the screaming. The confession hung between them like blood and water. For the first time since entering the vault, Elara saw the truth hidden beneath the Dragon King's reputation. He was not emotionless. He was haunted. A sudden roar exploded somewhere beneath the mountain. This time the entire chamber shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then came another sound. Not a dragon. Not thunder. A scream. Human. Elara turned sharply toward the lower corridor. Calith cursed under his breath. What was that? His expression became deadly. The lower prison levels. Another scream echoed upward. Then silence. Calith's hand tightened around his sword. Elara, he said quietly, whatever happens next, you do not leave this chamber. The floor beneath them trembled again, and deep below the ash vaults, something ancient began to wake. The third tremor struck hard enough to crack one of the glowing runes beneath the chamber floor. Blue light flashed violently across the broken symbol. Then every torch in the vault extinguished at once. Darkness swallowed the room. Elara's breath caught sharply in her throat. Somewhere in the black silence, stone groaned deep beneath the mountain like an enormous creature shifting in its sleep. The only light remaining came from the faint blue glow pulsing beneath her skin and the molten gold burning inside Calith's dragon eyes. Then came the sound again. Not a roar this time. Char. Massive chains dragging slowly across stone. Calith drew his sword instantly. Black fire erupted along the blade edge, illuminating the chamber in violent flashes of crimson. Elara, he said quietly, dangerously. Come here. She obeyed, before thinking. Not because she trusted him completely, because every instinct in her body suddenly screamed that something beneath the palace recognized her fire. Another crash echoed upward from the lower prison levels. A human voice cried out, then stopped abruptly. Calith moved toward the chamber entrance, placing himself unconsciously between Elara and the dark corridor beyond the vault. The gesture hit her harder than it should have after everything that had happened between them. He noticed her staring. This is not protection, he said coldly. No, it is containment. The lie sounded thinner now. Before Elara could answer, The iron doors at the far end of the chamber exploded inward. One of the royal guards stumbled through the smoke-covered entrance, covered in blood. My king. He collapsed to one knee, violently. Caleth crossed the room immediately. What happened? The guard's face had gone gray with terror. The lower seals broke. His voice shook. Something killed the prison keepers. Another tremor rippled beneath the floor. The man grabbed Caleth's armor desperately. It spoke your name. Silence hit the chamber. Even the air seemed to tighten. Caleth's face darkened instantly. Who opened the seals? We do not know. Blood spilled from the guard's mouth. The survivors swear the locks melted from blue fire. Elara froze. Caleth looked at her immediately. No, she whispered. I did not. I know. The answer came too fast for doubt. But the guard had already seen the blue glow beneath her skin. Fear twisted across his face. She is the reason, he breathed. The curse woke because of her. Caleth rose slowly. The temperature in the room surged violently. If you speak another word against her without proof, he said softly, I will remove your tongue myself. The guard went silent instantly. Elara stared at Caleth in shock. Not because he defended her, because he had done it publicly. Even here, in private darkness beneath the palace, that mattered. Caleth turned toward the corridor beyond the shattered doors. Seal the upper halls. No one enters the western tower without my command. My king, the council is demanding. I do not care what the council demands. The guard hesitated only briefly before retreating. The doors slammed shut behind him. Silence returned. Heavy, dangerous. Elara looked toward the dark corridor descending deeper beneath the mountain. What is down there? Caleth did not answer immediately, which frightened her more than any explanation would have. Finally he spoke. The first, Dragon King. The words settled through the chamber like ice water. Elara frowned faintly. That is impossible. Most of our history is. Another distant chain rattle echoed upward. Caleth's grip tightened around his sword. The founder of House Draven was never buried. The old kings feared death could not hold him. Elara stared at him. You imprisoned your own ancestor beneath the palace? He was no longer our ancestor by the time they chained him. The torch flames reignited, suddenly in violent bursts of red. For one brief second, Elara saw something move far down the corridor below. A massive silhouette, too large to be human. Gone instantly. Her pulse quickened. What did he become? Caleth's expression turned grim. A dragon cursed by immortality. Another silence followed. Then Elara understood. The blue flame. Caleth looked at her sharply. It can kill immortals, she whispered. That is why the lower seals reacted to me. Yes, the truth struck her all at once. The ancient creature below the palace had sensed the return of the only power capable of ending it. And it was waking. A low roar suddenly shook the mountain. Dust burst from the ceiling. Then came screams from somewhere above the vaults. Not prison screams, court screams. Caleth swore under his breath and moved toward the exit immediately. The council hall. Elara grabbed his wrist before he could leave. The moment their skin touched, heat exploded through the bond again. Caleth froze. So did she. Neither let go immediately. Dangerous mistake. Images flashed violently across Elara's mind. A child version of Caleth, standing in a burning courtyard. A woman with silver hair screaming as soldiers dragged her away. The former king laughing while dragonfire consumed chained prisoners. Young Caleth turning away because he could not stop it. The vision shattered. Elara staggered backward sharply. Caleth looked equally shaken. You saw my memories again. So did you. His jaw tightened. Because now she knew. Not rumors. Not politics. Truth. Caleth had grown up inside a dynasty built on slaughter, and part of him still believed he carried that same darkness in his blood. Another scream echoed from above. Longer this time. Caleth forced himself back under control instantly. Stay here. No. His gaze snapped toward her. You cannot hide me underground forever. That is not what I am trying to do. Then what are you trying to do? The question struck harder than she intended. Because Caliph suddenly had no answer. Elara stepped closer despite the fear twisting through her chest. You rejected me in front of your kingdom because you thought I would destroy you. His expression hardened. You still might. Then stop looking at me like you already care whether I do. Silence. Deadly silence. Caliph looked away first. That alone told her enough. A violent crash thundered above them. Stone dust rained from the ceiling. Caliph cursed softly. The court is under attack. By assassin? No. His eyes darkened toward the upper halls. Something worse. He moved quickly toward one of the sealed weapon racks and pulled free a second blade. Smaller silver black, etched with old dragon runes. Then he crossed back toward her. Elara blinked in surprise when he handed it to her. I do not know how to use this. You will learn quickly. You trust me with a weapon? Caliph's mouth curved faintly, bitterly. At the moment, you are the most dangerous thing in the palace. The strange, almost smile vanished again. Elara. His voice lowered. If anything happens above us, if the lower seals fully break, you run. She stared at him. And leave you? Yes. The answer came instantly. Too instantly. Because he already believed this story ended with her surviving, and him dying. The realization hurt in ways she did not understand yet. Caliph stepped closer then, lowering his voice further. There are truths this kingdom buried centuries ago. If the council discovers what your blood really means before I understand it myself, they will tear this palace apart, trying to reach you. You keep saying, understand. Ilara's grip tightened around the blade. What are you not telling me? Caliph hesitated. That alone terrified her. Then finally, the Blue Flame clan did not merely kill dragons. The chamber grew colder. They controlled them. Ilara's breath caught sharply. No, she whispered. Caliph's eyes remained fixed on hers. The old histories claim dragons bowed to Blue Flame blood before they bowed to kings. Another distant roar echoed above the palace. This one different. Not rage. Submission. Every instinct in Ilara's body suddenly tightened. Then, somewhere far above the mountain, one of the royal dragons screamed her name. Elara. The dragon's voice rolled through the mountain like thunder, wrapped around human speech. Notarwar. A name. The sound shook every torch flame sideways. Ilara's blood turned to ice. Caliph's face lost all color. For the first time since she had met him, the Dragon King looked genuinely unprepared. Then, the second scream came. Elara Vale. This time the voice was clearer, ancient, massive, filled with something far more terrifying than rage. Recognition. The mountain trembled violently beneath them. Dust burst from the ceiling in thick clouds. Somewhere above the ash vaults, bells began ringing across the palace towers. Alarm bells, war bells. Caliph moved instantly, grabbing Ilara's arm. We're leaving. Before she could answer, another explosion thundered overhead. The western wall of the chamber cracked open. Blue light poured through the fracture. Then came the screams. Noble. Guards. Dragons. The entire royal palace had fallen into chaos. Caliph dragged her into the corridor just as part of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Ancient stone shattered across the floor. Heat blasted through the narrow hallways in violent waves, carrying smoke and dragon fire through the lower levels. The upper palace was burning. Elara struggled to keep pace beside him. What is happening? Caliph's jaw clenched. The dragons are reacting to your blood. That does not explain why one of them knows my name. No, he said darkly. It explains far worse. Another tremor struck. A deep metallic groan echoed through the lower prison halls. The chains beneath the mountain were breaking. Caliph shoved open a side gate leading upward through the fortress tunnels. The moment they emerged into the western tower stairwell, the scale of the disaster became visible. Smoke flooded the upper corridors. Royal guards sprinted through the halls with weapons drawn. Servants screamed as dragon shadows crossed the burning glass ceilings overhead. Somewhere deeper in the palace, massive wings crashed through stone. The dragons were no longer obeying commands. Elara had never seen fear on soldiers before tonight. Now it lived openly in their eyes. A captain nearly collided with Kyleth before stopping dead. "My king, the sky beasts refuse all riders." Several attacked their own handlers. Kyleth kept moving. "Where is Seraphine?" "In the council chamber with the elders." "Seal the eastern bridge. No one leaves the palace." The captain hesitated briefly before looking toward Elara. "Not hatred. Terror. She caused this," he whispered. Kyleth stopped walking. The silence that followed was colder than violence. Then the king stepped toward the captain slowly enough to make the man visibly pale. "Choose your next words carefully." The captain immediately dropped to one knee. "My apologies, Majesty." Kyleth said nothing further. But Elara noticed something she had not before. The guards obeyed him out of fear. Yet tonight there was something else beneath it. Uncertainty. The prophecy had entered the palace. And suddenly even the immortal Dragon King looked vulnerable. Another roar shattered the air overhead. This one close. The stained glass ceiling above the corridor exploded inward. Everyone ducked instinctively as black scales the size of shields tore through the palace roof. A massive dragon claw slammed into the marble floor, only feet away from Elara. The creature was enormous. Night black scales, amber eyes, smoke pouring from between jagged teeth. Varin, Kyleth's dragon. The beast's arrival should have comforted the guards. Instead, panic spread instantly, because Varin was not looking at Kyleth. The dragon's eyes locked directly onto Elara. The corridor went still. Varin lowered his massive head slowly, nostrils flaring as though breathing her scent for the first time. Then the impossible happened. The Dragon King's beast bowed. Every guard in the corridor staggered backward in shock. One soldier dropped his spear. Another whispered an old prayer beneath his breath. Elara could not move. The dragon's burning amber eyes remained fixed on her with terrifying intensity. But there was no aggression in them, only recognition. No. Submission. Kyleth's expression darkened instantly. "Varin," he warned quietly. The dragon ignored him. A low, rumbling sound rose from the beast's chest, not hostile, almost mournful. Then Elara noticed something else. Scars. Deep silver scars ran beneath the scales around Varin's throat, as if chains had once been forced there. The dragon shifted closer toward her. Kyleth stepped between them immediately. "Enough." Varin snarled softly. The corridor temperature surged. For one dangerous heartbeat, king and dragon stared at each other like enemies. Elara realized with sudden horror that Kyleth was not fully controlling the beast anymore. Then Varin spoke. Not allowed. Inside her mind, "The fire has returned." Elara gasped sharply. Kyleth turned toward her instantly. "What did he say?" Her pulse hammered painfully. "He spoke to me." Every face in the corridor drained of color, because dragons did not speak to humans. Not directly. Not unless bound by ancient blood. Kyleth grabbed her wrist immediately and pulled her away from the others. "No one repeats what happened here," he ordered the guards coldly. No one dared answer. Varin watched them disappear down the corridor with burning eyes. Then the dragon spread his wings and launched upward, through the broken ceiling, into the storm-dark sky. The palace shook again. Kyleth led Elara through increasingly chaotic hallways toward the central court chambers. Smoke thickened around them. Noble families fled through guarded corridors, while priests desperately painted protection runes onto palace doors. The kingdom was unraveling in real time, and every whisper carried the same words now. Blue flame, blue flame, blue flame. They reached the outer council chamber, just as another argument erupted inside. "Cannot be allowed to live. She has already corrupted the dragons. If the northern clans discover this before sunrise..." What? Kyleth shoved the doors open violently. The chamber fell silent instantly. The royal council stood gathered around a massive war table lit by dragonfire lamps. Seraphine stood near the throne platform in crimson silk, untouched by ash despite the chaos outside. Several priests surrounded her now, whispering protective blessings under their breath. But the moment Elara entered the room, every priest stepped backward. Fear flashed openly across their faces. Seraphine masked hers faster than the others. "My king," she said carefully. "The palace is collapsing into panic, and yet you still found time to gather politicians." The insult landed sharply. One council elder stepped forward. "Majesty, the blue flame heir must be executed before dawn. The old laws are clear." Elara felt every eye in the chamber turn toward her. Like wolves, scenting blood. Kyleth's voice remained cold. "The old laws also state the throne cannot kill a bonded mate without consent from the sacred fire." The room erupted instantly. "She cannot truly be your mate. The ritual was corrupted. Her bloodline should never have survived." "Enough." Kyleth did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Silence crushed the chamber immediately. Then Seraphine moved gracefully toward the throne platform. "No one questions your authority, Majesty." Her tone remained smooth. "But the kingdom remembers the Hollow Wars. If the people believe the Blue Flame clan has returned, it has not," Kyleth snapped. The room froze, because he had answered too quickly. Seraphine noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then she turned toward Elara with calculated sympathy. "Poor thing," she murmured softly. "You do not even understand what your blood has done, do you?" Elara met her gaze evenly, despite the fear clawing through her chest. "Enlighten me." Seraphine smiled faintly. "The blue flame dragons once ruled the skies beside human queens." Her voice carried clearly through the chamber, until their queens betrayed the dragon kings and nearly destroyed the immortal bloodlines forever. Elara frowned slightly. Something about the story felt wrong. Not incomplete. Manipulated. Kyleth noticed too. "That is enough, Seraphine." But Seraphine continued anyway. "The last blue flame queen seduced the dragon throne before burning thousands alive during the Crimson betrayal." The council murmured agreement immediately. History repeated often enough became religion. Elara felt anger stir unexpectedly beneath her fear. Not because of herself, because she suddenly understood the shape of the lie. Every story blamed the blue flame women, never the kings who hunted them. Kyleth stepped forward dangerously. "You will stop speaking now." Seraphine looked directly at him. Then finally, for the first time all night, the perfect mask slipped. Jealousy flashed openly across her face. Not merely political ambition, personal rage. "You touched her," she whispered. The room went silent. Kyleth's expression darkened instantly. Seraphine laughed once under her breath, brittle and wounded. "After everything you told me about the prophecy, after all the years you swore you would never risk the kingdom for a bond," the realization spread visibly across the council. The king had touched the blue flame heir willingly, which meant the mate bond was already strengthening. Dangerously. Elara felt heat rise painfully beneath her skin again. Kyleth noticed immediately. So did Seraphine. And suddenly, the noblewoman smiled. Not kindly, triumphantly, because she had finally found the weapon she needed. "If the bond progresses further," Seraphine said softly, "the ancient rites require the court to witness the dragon mark awakening." The chamber went cold. One priest whispered in horror. "No." Elara frowned. "What awakening?" No one answered immediately. Then Kyleth spoke quietly. "If the mate bond fully seals," his eyes locked onto hers, "the dragon fire inside you will permanently awaken." Fear slid through her chest. "And if it does?" The silence lasted too long. Finally, one council elder whispered the truth. "The blue flame queen returns." The words settled over the chamber like an execution sentence. "The blue flame queen returns." No one moved after that. Even the dragonfire lamps along the council walls seemed to dim beneath the weight of the old title. Elara stood perfectly still at the center of the hall. But inside her chest, something had begun to crack open. Not power, not confidence. Memory. Fragments brushed the edge of her mind. Blue flames spiraling across battlefields. Dragons kneeling before women crowned in silver. Blood staining snow beneath black skies. The visions vanished before she could grasp them fully, leaving only a sharp ache behind her eyes. The council stared at her, as though those memories might suddenly become visible on her skin. Seraphine broke the silence first. The rites must begin immediately. Kylith turned toward her slowly. No. The refusal came without hesitation. Seraphine's expression tightened. You know the law. I know exactly who wrote the law. The chamber grew tense again. Elara watched carefully now. Every exchange between them carried years beneath it. Old agreements, political bargains, broken trust. Seraphine had expected to become queen long before tonight. Perhaps she had spent years preparing for it. And now Elara's existence threatened not only her ambition, but the entire future she had built around the throne. That made her dangerous. Not because she was cruel, because desperation always sharpened intelligent people into weapons. One of the elder counselors stepped forward cautiously. Majesty, if the bond completes without containment, the consequences could destroy the kingdom. Another added, the ancient dragons may fully awaken, and if the northern clans hear the Blue Flame Queen lives, they already know, Kylith interrupted coldly. Silence followed instantly. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. Outside the palace walls, distant dragon screams still echoed across the mountains. The beasts were restless now, unstable. Elara could feel them somehow, not hear them directly, but sense their agitation through the strange burning inside her veins. It frightened her enough to keep silent. Seraphine studied her carefully before speaking again. She should be brought to the moon crucible. Elara frowned faintly. The name alone sounded wrong. Kylith's reaction was immediate. Absolutely not. The noblewoman stepped closer toward the throne platform, voice calm and measured. The crucible will reveal whether her blood truly carries the royal blue flame inheritance or merely traces of corrupted magic. Kylith's eyes darkened dangerously. You know what the crucible does to living dragon blood, and you know the court will demand proof. Their gazes locked. For a moment, the entire room disappeared around them. Then Elara finally spoke. What is the moon crucible? Several priests visibly flinched. No one answered, which meant the answer was terrible. Kylith looked toward her slowly. An ancient judgment rite. That explains nothing. His jaw tightened. It forces hidden bloodlines to awaken. Fear slid coldly through her stomach. And if the person survives? No one spoke immediately. Seraphine smiled faintly. Then the kingdom learns the truth. Elara turned toward Kylith. He did not deny it, which told her enough. The rite killed people. Or worse. Before she could speak again, another roar exploded outside the palace walls, louder than before, powerful enough to shake dust from the vaulted ceiling. The council chamber windows rattled violently. Then came screaming from the city below. One of the guards rushed into the chamber breathless. My king dragons are descending into the lower districts. The council erupted instantly. What? They never enter the city. The beasts are losing control. Kylith moved immediately. How many? At least 7 royal dragons. More circling the outer towers. Elara felt the blue heat beneath her skin pulse violently. The guard looked toward her with obvious fear. They are searching for something. No, not something. Someone. She understood it instinctively. The dragons were searching for her. Kylith understood too. His expression darkened with visible calculation. Then suddenly every dragon outside the palace fell silent. The absence of sound was worse than the screaming had been. The entire chamber froze. Elara felt it first. A pressure deep in the air. Ancien. Massive. Approaching. The dragonfire lamps flickered blue. Then a shadow passed across the stained glass ceiling overhead. Not Varen. Something much larger. The ceiling darkened completely, as an enormous shape crossed above the palace tower. A heartbeat later, every dragon in the capital bowed. The council members rushed toward the windows in panic. One priest collapsed to his knees immediately. No, he whispered. It cannot be. Kylith's face hardened into pure dread. Then the sky split open. A dragon descended through the storm clouds above the palace, not black like the royal beasts, not crimson like the war dragons. Silver. Ancient silver scales covered a creature so enormous its wings blotted out half the moon. Blue fire leaked from between its teeth as it circled the palace once. Slowly, deliberately, the city below erupted into chaos. People screamed, bells rang endlessly, and the ancient silver dragon landed on the outer palace bridge with enough force to shake the entire mountain. No one in the chamber breathed, because every person alive recognized the impossible truth. That dragon had been dead for centuries. Elara's knees nearly gave out beneath her. Not from fear, recognition. The creature lifted its massive head toward the council chamber windows. Its glowing blue eyes locked directly onto her. Then, inside her mind, a deep, ancient voice spoke. "Daughter." Elara gasped sharply and stumbled backward. Caliph caught her before she fell. The moment his arm wrapped around her waist, the entire chamber saw it. The king's instinctive need to protect her. The silence that followed was deadly. Seraphine's expression changed completely. Not jealousy now. Hatred. Pure hatred. The silver dragon outside opened its jaws slowly. Blue fire curled between its teeth. Several counselors screamed. Kylith pulled Elara behind him instantly as royal guards rushed forward. But the dragon did not attack. Instead, it lowered its enormous head toward the palace windows. A gesture, not aggression. Reverence. Then every dragon across the capital answered with one unified roar. The sound shattered half the glass in the chamber. Elara pressed a hand against her chest as the bond inside her tightened painfully. The blue heat beneath her skin spread up her throat now, faint glowing veins appearing briefly along her collarbone before fading again. Caliph noticed immediately. So did Seraphine. The noblewoman stepped backward slowly, horror flashing across her face for the first time. She is changing already. The priests began whispering prayers. One council elder looked ready to faint. The awakening has begun. Kylith's grip tightened protectively around Elara before he seemed to realize what he was doing. Too late. Everyone saw. Seraphine's voice cut through the silence sharply. "You said you would never let the prophecy control you." Kylith ignored her. His eyes remained fixed on the glowing marks briefly surfacing beneath Elara's skin. Fear moved through his expression again. Not fear of her. Fear for her. The realization hit Elara unexpectedly hard. Then the silver dragon outside the palace spoke again inside her mind. "They lied to you." Fragments of memory flashed violently through her thoughts. Women burning beneath royal banners. Blue flame queens chained in public squares. Dragons slaughtered beside human riders. A throne covered in blood. Elara staggered. Caliph steadied her immediately. "What are you seeing?" Her breathing shook. "The histories," she whispered. "The kingdom lied about the war." The silver dragon's voice rumbled through her mind again. The Blue Flame clan did not betray the dragon throne. Another memory surged through her. A king ordering executions. Children dragged through snow. Silver fire, consuming entire bloodlines. Not justice. Extermination. Elara looked toward the horrified council. "You murdered them." The accusation shattered the chamber. One elder slammed his hand against the war table. "Careful, girl." "No," Elara said, stronger this time. "You hunted them." The silver dragon outside roared. Blue fire burst across the palace bridge. Several counselors screamed as cracks split the chamber walls. Kylith stepped fully in front of Elara now, sword drawn. Not against her. Against everyone else. The entire room saw it. The Dragon King had made his choice. Not completely. Not yet. But enough. Seraphine understood first, and something inside her finally broke. "You would risk the throne for her?" she whispered. Calith's eyes never left the council. "If anyone in this chamber attempts to harm her," he said quietly, "I will burn this palace down around you myself." Silence crashed through the hall. Then Seraphine smiled. Not wounded anymore. Victorious. Because Calith had just done exactly what she needed. Publicly. In front of witnesses. He had chosen the Blue Flame heir over the council. Over stability. Over the kingdom itself. and now she finally had the justification to destroy them both. The silence after Calith's threat lasted only a few heartbeats before the palace doors burst open again. This time it was not guards who entered. It was the high priestess of the Old Moon Temple. The chamber shifted instantly at her arrival. Even the counselors who moments earlier had shouted over one another now lowered their heads in uneasy respect. Priestess Elara moved slowly across the obsidian floor. Wrapped in layered gray robes embroidered with silver moons, her pale hair braided with ceremonial bones from ancient dragons long dead. Unlike the others, she did not look frightened. She looked prepared. That realization chilled Elara immediately. Elara stopped several feet from the throne platform, ancient eyes resting first on Calith, then on Elara. Finally, the priestess bowed. Not deeply, not submissively, carefully. As the prophecy warned, she said softly, "The Blue Flame Queen has awakened beside the Ash-Crowned King." The title struck the room like thunder. Calith's jaw tightened visibly. "Do not call her that." Elora's expression never changed. "The dragons already have." Outside the shattered palace windows, the silver dragon remained waiting on the bridge beneath the storm-dark sky. Its enormous wings folded against its sides, as though it had arrived not to attack the capital, but to witness judgment. Elara felt the creature watching her constantly now. Not predator, guardian. The realization unsettled her deeply. Calith stepped slightly in front of her again. "Why are you here, Elara?" The priestess folded her hands calmly. "Because the Moon Temple warned your father this night would come." Several council members shifted uneasily. Seraphine narrowed her eyes. "You knew the Blue Flame bloodline survived?" Elara looked toward her without warmth. "The temple knew one child escaped the slaughter." Elara's pulse stuttered painfully. "One child." "Yeah." The priestess continued quietly. "We hid her existence from the throne for 17 years. The chamber erupted instantly. You concealed forbidden blood from the crown. That was treason. She should have been executed at birth." Calith's voice cut through them like steel. "Enough." Silence fell immediately. His dragon eyes burned brighter now, molten gold bleeding into black. The palace seemed smaller when he looked angry, not because he raised his voice, but because violence lived so naturally beneath his skin that every person nearby instinctively feared provoking it further. He looked back toward Elara. "Explain." The priestess's gaze drifted toward Elara. "Your mother carried you from the Burning Veil Fortress during the final purge." Her voice softened faintly. "She reached the Moon Temple half dead and begged us to hide you." Elara could barely breathe. No one had ever spoken of her mother, beyond vague mentions of treason and execution. She knew the crown would never stop hunting Blue Flame heirs. Elara continued. "So the temple severed your dragon mark before the royal bloodseers could find you." Elara instinctively touched the center of her chest. Suddenly, the strange emptiness she had carried her entire life made sense. The feeling that something inside her had always been sleeping. Broken. Waiting. Calith looked grim, and the sacred flame restored the severed bond during the claiming. Yes. The priestess's ancient eyes darkened. The mate bond reawakened her blood fully. Seraphine laughed once softly beneath her breath. How romantic. No one missed the venom beneath it. Elara ignored her. "The awakening cannot be stopped now." Elara swallowed hard. "What happens to me?" No one answered immediately, which terrified her more than any explanation. Then Elara finally spoke. "The Blue Flame inheritance evolves through stages. The first awakening calls the dragons." Her eyes drifted briefly toward the silver beast outside. "The second restores ancestral memory." Fragments flashed painfully behind Elara's eyes again. Fire. Gens. Women screaming beneath royal banners. Calith noticed her flinch instantly. "And the final stage?" he asked quietly. The priestess looked directly at him. "The Queen Ascension." Cold silence swallowed the chamber. One council elder whispered in horror. "No." Elara frowned faintly. "What does that mean?" Elara's answer came softly. "It means every dragon in the kingdom will eventually recognize her authority above the throne itself." The chamber exploded into panic. "That cannot be allowed." The crown would collapse. The northern clans would revolt. The prophecy is happening exactly as feared. Caleth's expression became deadly. Then Seraphine spoke clearly above the chaos. The moon crucible. Silence returned instantly. She stepped toward the center of the chamber, crimson silk whispering across obsidian floors. If the blue flame awakening truly cannot be stopped, then the ancient rites must determine whether she ascends or burns. Elara's stomach tightened again. Caleth's face darkened immediately. No, Seraphine turned toward him slowly. You already know the council will force the rite eventually. They can try. You cannot fight the entire kingdom for her. The words landed sharply, because they were true. Caleth might terrify the council, but even kings eventually lost wars against fear. Seraphine continued carefully, almost gently now. The crucible was designed for exactly this purpose. If her blood is unstable, the fire will consume her before the bond completes. Elara looked toward Caleth. His silence told her enough. The rite truly could kill her. Velora spoke next, voice grim. And if she survives. No one finished the sentence. They did not need to. Then the silver dragon outside the palace roared again. The chamber windows shattered completely this time. Blue fire swept briefly across the outer bridge as the ancient beast lifted its massive head toward the storm. Another dragon answered from somewhere far across the capital. Then another, and another. Elara suddenly understood what was happening. The dragons were gathering. Caleth understood too. His expression darkened with visible urgency. How many? He demanded toward the guards. A captain rushed forward, pale-faced. At least 40 dragons now circle the capital skies, more arriving from the mountain territories every minute. Fear moved visibly through the council. Dragons did not gather peacefully. Not in those numbers. Velora's voice lowered. The old blood remembers its queen. Elara recoiled slightly at the word queen. No, that could not be her. She was a forgotten ward, raised on scraps of royal mercy. A girl who spent years silent at court dinners because noble houses preferred pretending she did not exist. A girl who learned to disappear before she learned to fight. Not a queen. Never a queen. As if sensing her panic, Caleth looked toward her, and for the first time all night, the harshness in his face softened completely. Only for a second. But she saw it. So did Seraphine. The noblewoman's expression hardened instantly. That single glance confirmed her worst fear. Caleth was already emotionally compromised. The Dragon King, the man who trusted no bond, no prophecy, no weakness, was beginning to care for the one woman capable of destroying him. Seraphine realized she was losing him, and desperate people became dangerous quickly. My king, she said softly, there is another problem. Caleth's attention shifted reluctantly toward her. Seraphine folded her hands gracefully. The northern envoys demand audience. The chamber darkened further. The northern sky clans. Dragon riders older than the throne itself. War-born houses that still worshipped ancient bloodlines. If they learned the blue flame heir had awakened, the kingdom could fracture overnight. Caleth's jaw clenched visibly. Deny them. They already entered the palace. The doors behind the council chamber opened immediately afterward. 5 figures stepped inside, wearing silver-black armor lined with wolf fur and dragon scales. Their leader carried a spear forged from pale bone, his face marked with ritual scars burned beneath both eyes. The northern commander stopped the moment he saw Elara. Then, before the entire royal court, he dropped to one knee. Every northern warrior followed instantly. The chamber went dead silent. The commander lowered his head deeply. Our clans greet the daughter of blue flame. Panic exploded across the council. But Elara barely heard them. Because the northern commander's next words changed everything. The dragons have waited 800 years for your return, my queen. The word queen shattered the last illusion of control inside the council chamber. Several nobles began shouting immediately. Priests argued over ancient law. One elderly counselor nearly collapsed against the war table, muttering prayers to the old dragon gods beneath his breath. Outside the palace, dragons roared across the storm-dark skies. as though answering the declaration themselves. But Elara heard almost none of it. Her heartbeat thundered too loudly. My queen. The title felt wrong against her skin. Heavy. Impossible. She had spent 17 years being treated as less than noble, less than useful, less than visible. She knew how to survive neglect. She knew how to stay silent during insults. She knew how to disappear. But queens were seen. Queens were hunted. And judging by the terror now spreading across the chamber, queens like her were destroyed. Caliph stepped forward immediately, positioning himself between Elara and the kneeling northern warriors. You will not address her that way again. The northern commander slowly lifted his scarred face. The dragons already have. Dangerous silence followed. The commander's eyes moved toward Elara again, not with lust for power, not with fear, with reverence. Our clans remember the truth the southern throne buried. His voice carried through the chamber clearly. The blue flame queens did not betray the dragons. They bound them. The council erupted again. Lies, blasphemy, treason against the crown. The commander ignored them all. Before the Hollow Wars, dragons chose queens before kings. The blue flame bloodline balanced the ancient beasts and prevented the immortal corruption from consuming dragonkind. Kylith's expression darkened slightly. He knew parts of this already. Elara noticed immediately. You knew, she whispered. Khalith did not answer, which was answer enough. The northern commander continued. When the old kings realized blue flame queens could command dragons beyond the throne's control, they slaughtered the bloodline to seize dominion over the skies. The silver dragon outside the palace roared in agreement. The sound shook the chamber walls. Several council members visibly paled. Violora lowered her head grimly. The Moon Temple warned the throne that killing the queens would destabilize the dragons. And the throne ignored you, the commander said. Calith's voice turned sharp. Enough. The room froze instantly. His gaze swept over the council with cold fury. Every person in this chamber seems eager to discuss 800 years of buried history while my capital burns outside these walls. Silence followed. Then, another explosion echoed through the palace. A tower somewhere in the eastern district collapsed. Smoke rose beyond the broken windows. The dragons circling the capital were growing increasingly agitated. Elara could feel it now, almost constantly, like distant thunder beneath her ribs. The bond between her and the dragons strengthened with every passing minute, and that terrified her, because she still could not fully control the fire awakening inside her. As if sensing her fear, Caliph turned slightly toward her. Do not banits. The words were quiet enough that only she heard them, but they affected her more than they should have. Because despite everything, the rejection, the chains, the prophecy, his first instinct had become calming her, not controlling her, not condemning her, protecting her. Seraphine saw it too. Elara noticed the exact moment the noblewoman realized Kylith's feelings had crossed into dangerous territory. Something cold settled behind Seraphine's eyes. Not heartbreak anymore. Decision. Then the noblewoman stepped gracefully toward the center of the chamber. The moon crucible begins at dawn. Caliph turned sharply. I said no, and the kingdom heard you. Seraphine's voice remained calm. Which is precisely why the council now fears you are compromised. That landed harder than any accusation so far. Because it was true. The Dragon King was no longer behaving like a ruler protecting the throne. He was behaving like a man, trying desperately not to lose someone. Several council members exchanged uneasy glances. One finally spoke carefully. Majesty, if the bond continues strengthening unchecked, another finished the thought quietly. You may lose command of the dragons entirely. Calith's jaw tightened visibly. The northern commander looked unimpressed. Perhaps the throne deserves to. Half the royal guards immediately drew steel. The northern warriors did the same. The chamber exploded into chaos. Elara. The voice entered her mind suddenly. The silver dragon outside. She flinched sharply. Kylith noticed instantly. What is it? Before she could answer, another vision struck her violently. Not fragmented this time. clear. A battlefield drowned in snow. Blue fire tearing across the sky. A woman crowned in silver, standing beside a dragon larger than mountains. And opposite her, a king wearing the Draven crown. Young, terrified, ordering soldiers to fire anyway. The woman screamed as dragon fire consumed her people. Then the vision twisted sharply. The silver-crowned queen turning towards someone hidden behind the battlefield smoke. A child. A little girl with blue fire in her veins. Protect her. The vision shattered. Elara gasped hard enough to stumble. Kyleth caught her again before she hit the floor. The chamber watched in silence. The king's hands lingered at her waist longer this time. Long enough to become intimate. Dangerous. Kyleth lowered his voice immediately. What did you see? Elara struggled to breathe evenly. The war. The room quieted instantly. She looked toward the horrified council. The blue flame queens were trying to stop the dragons. Velora closed her eyes, as though she had waited years to hear someone say it aloud. Elara continued shakily. The dragons were becoming corrupted. Immortal too long. Violent. The northern commander nodded grimly. Without the queens, dragon madness spread through the bloodlines. Kyleth's expression darkened further, because suddenly, pieces of his own curse began fitting together. Elara looked toward him slowly. You knew the dragons were dying. Silence. Then Kyleth answered quietly. Yes. The confession froze the chamber. One council elder stepped backward in horror. Majesty. Kyleth ignored him completely. He looked only at Elara now. The immortality within dragon blood has been decaying for centuries, he admitted. Every generation grows more unstable, more violent, harder to control. Outside the palace, another dragon screamed, a sound filled, not with rage now, but pain. Elara felt it in her chest instantly. Kyleth saw her reaction. The bond lets you feel them. She nodded weakly. The realization hit the room all at once. The blue flame queens had never merely controlled dragons. They healed them, which meant the kingdom had exterminated the very bloodline keeping dragonkind alive. Panic spread visibly through the council. Seraphine moved quickly before the truth could settle further. She still carries the only fire capable of killing immortals, she snapped sharply. Have you all forgotten that? The fear returned immediately, because no matter what truths emerged tonight, one fact remained. Elara's flames could kill the Dragon King himself. Seraphine stepped toward Kyleth carefully now, lowering her voice. If the bond seals completely, you may not survive it. Kyleth's face remained unreadable, but Elara felt the truth through the bond. He had known that from the beginning. The prophecy was not symbolic. Her power genuinely threatened his life. And yet, he still had not walked away from her. The realization shook her more deeply than anything else tonight. Suddenly, the silver dragon outside roared again. But this time, it was not alone. Another roar answered. Then another. Then dozens more. The chamber windows darkened as dragons descended onto the palace towers surrounding the court. Not attacking. Gathering. Waiting. The northern commander slowly rose to his feet. The dragons have chosen. Fear spread instantly across the council, because dragons choosing anything without the crown's command had not happened in centuries. Velora looked toward Kyleth grimly. The kingdom will divide by sunrise. The Dragon King already knew. Elara saw it in his face. Some would kneel to the blue flame queen. Others would try to kill her before she fully awakened. Civil war stood one breath away. Then Seraphine spoke the final words that shattered what little peace remained. If the kingdom must choose between the crown and the blue flame. Her cold gaze locked onto Elara. Then one of them must die before dawn. The chamber fell into deadly stillness. No one rebuked Seraphine. No one even looked shocked, because every person in that room had already begun thinking the same thing. The kingdom could not survive with both the ash-crowned king and the blue flame queen alive. One represented the old order. The other threatened to rewrite it entirely. Elara felt the realization settle coldly into her bones. She had not become a person tonight. She had become a choice. Caliph stepped forward slowly, dragonfire flickering beneath his skin. Be very careful what you suggest next. Seraphine met his gaze without flinching. I am suggesting survival. The throne survives because of fear, the Northern commander interrupted coldly. That is not survival. That is decay. Half the guards raised weapons instantly. The Northern warriors answered in kind. The council chamber transformed into a battlefield within seconds. Steel hissed from sheaths. Dragonfire lamps trembled violently. And through it all, the dragons outside continued circling the palace like a storm waiting to break. Elara suddenly understood how kingdoms truly collapsed. Not through one battle, one moment, but through fear growing faster than trust. Caliph moved toward the throne platform with terrifying calm. Everyone lowers their weapons now. No one obeyed immediately. That frightened Elara more than the swords themselves. The king noticed too. For the first time in his reign, the room hesitated before obeying him. Seraphine saw it and smiled faintly. Caliph's authority was cracking, not because he had become weaker, because his people no longer knew whether he would choose the throne or her. Then the palace bells began ringing again. 3 long strikes. Pause. 3 more. Velora's face drained of color. The eastern gates. A guard rushed into the chamber breathless. My king, the outer districts are rioting. Several dragon riders refused orders and opened the mountain passes. The northern commander swore softly beneath his breath. Caliph's expression hardened instantly. Who entered? The guards swallowed hard. The southern war clans. Fear visibly spread through the council. Elara did not understand why, until Seraphine whispered the answer. The Red Fang houses. The name alone changed the air in the chamber. Caliph's voice turned cold enough to freeze blood. Why are they here? The guard hesitated. Then finally, they heard the Blue Flame Queen returned. The room exploded again. The Red Fang clans were ancient dragon hunters, southern bloodlines loyal not to prophecy or dragons, but to conquest. Their armies had helped exterminate the Blue Flame houses during the Hollow Wars, and now they were coming for her. Elara suddenly felt very tired. Not physically, deeply, as though fate itself had been hunting her since birth, and had finally caught up. Caliph looked toward the chamber windows where dragons circled through smoke-dark skies, then toward the panicked council, then finally toward Elara. Something changed in his face. Decision. Not complete, not gentle, but real. Seraphine saw it instantly. You cannot seriously be considering protecting her. Caliph's voice remained quiet. I am considering what happens if she dies. She is the prophecy. She may also be the only thing keeping the dragons from tearing this kingdom apart. The words hit the room brutally, because everyone knew the dragons were already becoming unstable. Caliph turned toward the council fully now. For centuries, this throne buried the truth about dragon corruption, about the Blue Flame bloodline, about the wars. Several elders looked away. Cowards. Elara realized they had known pieces of the truth all along. Caliph continued coldly. And now the consequences stand at our gates. The northern commander lowered his spear slightly. Then let the queen ascend. Several counselors shouted in outrage immediately. Seraphine's face hardened. If she ascends fully, the dragons may abandon the throne forever. No, Veolora said quietly. They may finally obey willingly, instead of through fear. Silence. Caliph looked toward the priestess sharply. You support this? Veolora's ancient gaze moved toward Elara. I support ending 8 centuries of bloodshed. Before anyone could answer, Elara suddenly doubled over in pain. The bond inside her chest ignited violently. Blue fire flashed beneath her skin. The entire chamber recoiled. Caliph reached her first. Elara. Her breathing fractured sharply. Something was wrong. Not with the bond, with the dragons. She could feel them. All of them. Fear. Pain. Violence spreading through the capital. One emotion rising above the others. Hunger. Elara grabbed Caliph's arm hard enough to bruise. They're losing control. The room went silent. Caliph's face darkened instantly. How many? All of them. Outside the palace, a dragon screamed. Then came the sound of collapsing stone. Another roar answered, closer this time. The silver dragon outside the bridge suddenly lifted its head violently toward the eastern city and roared in warning. Too late. A massive black dragon burst upward from the lower districts, trailing fire and blood through the night sky. Its movements were wrong, jerking, savage, completely feral. Several riders hung dead from broken chains across its back. The beast crashed into one of the palace towers. Stone exploded outward. Screaming echoed through the capital. The council descended into chaos. Dragon madness. It spread already. The corruption reached the riders. Caliph cursed under his breath. Then the feral dragon looked directly toward the council chamber windows, toward Elara. Its burning eyes widened suddenly. Recognition. The beast roared so loudly the palace shook, and instead of attacking, it bowed. The chamber froze. Even Caliph stared in disbelief. The maddened dragon slowly lowered its massive head toward the palace, despite blood pouring from its jaws. Submission. Elara's blue flames flickered uncontrollably beneath her skin. She could feel the dragon's agony now, the corruption twisting through its immortal blood. And instinctively, without understanding how, she stepped forward. Caliph grabbed her wrist immediately. No. But Elara looked at the suffering creature outside and knew it was not here to kill her. It was begging. The dragon screamed again. Not rage this time. Whine. Every instinct inside her answered. The blue fire rose through her veins. The council backed away in terror. Elara, Caliph warned sharply. She looked at him and saw the fear there. Not fear of death. Fear that she would destroy herself. That realization struck her harder than the bond itself. Still, she pulled free gently. The dragon outside slammed against the ruined tower again, body convulsing violently as black corruption spread beneath its scales like poison. It was dying. No, worse, becoming monstrous. Elara stepped toward the shattered windows. Blue fire curled around her fingers instinctively. The chamber screamed at her to stop. She ignored them all. The moment she touched the dragon's bleeding scales through the broken stone archway, power exploded through the palace. Blue fire surged across the dragon's body like living light. The beast roared violently. Caliph moved toward her instantly, but froze, because the corruption beneath the dragon's scales was disappearing. The black veins receded. The dragon's agony eased, and slowly, impossibly, the ancient beast began to heal. Silence swallowed the entire chamber. The dragon lowered itself completely before Elara now. Massive head bowed beneath her trembling hand. Alive. Sane. Saved. The truth struck the room all at once. The blue flame queen did not destroy dragons. She purified them, and suddenly the greatest fear in the kingdom became something far more dangerous. Hope. Hope changed the room more violently than fear ever had. Elara felt it immediately. Not from everyone. Never everyone. But enough. The northern warriors stared at her now with open awe. Several royal guards who moments earlier had looked ready to execute her no longer seemed certain where to point their weapons. Even some council elders appeared shaken by what they had witnessed, because lies survived only until truth became visible. And they had all just watched the blue flame heal a dragon the throne considered beyond saving. The wounded beast outside the shattered tower let out a low rumbling sound and pressed its head lower beneath Elara's trembling hand. Massive golden eyes closed slowly, not in submission now. Relief. The sight hit her unexpectedly hard. All her life, she had been treated like a curse. Yet the first thing her power had done was stop suffering. Behind her, someone whispered softly, "Moon, preserve us." Seraphine stepped backward, not in fear of Elara herself, in fear of losing control of the story. Because if the kingdom learned the Blue Flame Queens were healers instead of destroyers, the entire foundation of royal history would crack apart overnight. Caliph saw it too. His eyes remained fixed on Elara, something raw and conflicted, moving beneath his usually merciless expression. Then the dragon outside spoke into Elara's mind again. You carry her heart. Another flash tore through Elara's vision. A silver-crowned woman kneeling beside a dying dragon, beneath falling snow. Blue fire moving through her hands. A child, hidden beneath black cloaks while soldiers searched burning ruins. Then the woman turning towards someone unseen. Protect my daughter. The vision shattered. Elara nearly collapsed from the force of it. Caliph caught her instantly. This time, he did not let go immediately. His hand pressed firmly against the small of her back, while the other steadied her arm, his body shielding hers from the terrified court without conscious thought. The entire chamber noticed, especially Seraphine. The noblewoman's face became perfectly still, which frightened Elara more than visible anger would have, because cold people did their worst damage after emotion disappeared. Elara, Caliph said quietly, look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes. The dragon fire beneath his skin had calmed slightly, and for the first time since the claiming ceremony, she saw no rejection there. Only conflict. Dangerous, consuming conflict. What did you see? He asked. My mother. The words left the room silent. Velora inhaled sharply. Calith's grip tightened, almost imperceptibly. What about her? Elara swallowed hard. She knew they were coming. Memories continued surfacing in fragments, now faster, stronger, impossible to stop. She hid me before the soldiers reached the fortress. Her breathing trembled. The queens knew the throne would slaughter every surviving heir. One council elder slammed his hand against the table. Enough with these fantasies. The silver dragon outside roared so violently the chamber walls cracked. The old man went silent instantly. Caliph looked toward the council slowly. You saw what her power did. No one answered, because denying it now would sound insane. Seraphine moved carefully toward the throne platform. Healing one dragon changes nothing. It changes everything. The northern commander replied coldly. The noblewoman ignored him. The prophecy still stands. Calith's expression darkened. Yes, that was the problem. No matter what truths emerged tonight, one fact remained untouched. Elara's blue fire could still kill immortals. Could still kill him. Seraphine seized the hesitation instantly. She healed the dragon because the bond is evolving. Her voice sharpened slightly. And when the Queen Ascension completes, no one knows what her fire becomes capable of. Fear spread again through parts of the chamber. Elara hated that they might not be entirely wrong, because she still did not understand the thing awakening inside her. The blue fire frightened her too. Caliph noticed. Of course he did. His gaze softened for one dangerous second before hardening again. Then the palace shook violently. A thunderous roar exploded beneath the mountain, not from the sky, from below, the lower prison chambers. Every torch in the council hall flickered blue. Velora went pale instantly. No. Calith's face darkened with sudden realization. The first king. Another impact shook the palace foundations. Stone cracked beneath the chamber floor. The ancient creature beneath the mountain was fully awake now, and it had sensed Elara. The wounded dragon outside the tower lifted its head sharply and snarled toward the lower palace levels. Fear. Real fear. Elara felt it through the dragon bond immediately. Whatever slept beneath the mountain terrified even dragons. Caliph released her and turned toward the guards. Evacuate the lower palace immediately. Panic spread. The counselors began shouting over one another again. Then the floor exploded upward. Stone shattered across the chamber. A massive claw burst through the obsidian tiles surrounded by black fire and ancient chains. Several nobles screamed as the entire throne platform cracked apart violently. And from beneath the palace, something began climbing upward. The smell hit first. Ash. Blood. Ancient fire rotting from the inside. Then came the eyes. Enormous molten eyes glowing through darkness beneath the broken floor. Not dragon. Not human. Something twisted between both. The first Dragon King emerged from the shattered throne room like a nightmare dragged from history itself. Black scales covered half his body, while the other half remained horribly human, beneath burned royal armor, fused directly into flesh. Broken chains hung from his limbs. Vast ruined wings dragged behind him like torn shadows, and ancient blue burn scars split across his chest exactly where Elara's flames had touched the assassin earlier. The chamber descended into screaming chaos. Guards rushed forward. The creature roared once. Half of them died instantly. Black dragon fire consumed the front line of soldiers before they could raise shields. Nobles fled toward the outer halls. Priests collapsed praying. The council shattered completely. Caliph drew his sword and stepped directly between the monster and Elara. The first king laughed. The sound was wrong. Too deep. Too old. So, the creature rasped, staring directly at Elara. The blue flame survived after all. Every dragon outside the palace screamed at once. The monster's molten gaze shifted toward Kylith. My blood still protects her. A terrible smile twisted across its ruined face. How disappointing. Kylith's voice became pure steel. You are no king of mine. The creature laughed again. You wear my crown. Then it looked back toward Elara, and something almost human entered its expression. Longing. You carry her eyes. Elara froze. The first king stepped forward slowly despite the soldiers attacking him from every side. Their weapons shattered against his scales. She nearly destroyed me for what I did to her bloodline. His burned mouth curved grotesquely. I should have killed every last queen when I had the chance. Blue fire exploded instinctively from Elara's hands. The entire chamber lit silver blue. The monster stopped moving, not afraid, recognizing. The scars across its chest began smoking violently beneath her flames. Kylith looked back toward Elara sharply. Do not let him near you. But the first king smiled wider. The ash crown fears you now exactly as I once feared her. Elara's chest tightened painfully. Kylith stepped forward, black dragonfire erupting around his blade. You will not speak her name again. The creature's molten eyes shifted toward him, and suddenly all traces of amusement vanished. You love her already. Silence struck the chamber. Kylith froze. The bond between him and Elara flared violently, and everyone in the room felt it. The first king laughed softly. There it is. Kylith attacked first. Black dragonfire crashed through the shattered throne room as the Dragon King's blade slammed into the ancient monster with enough force to split stone apart. The battle exploded instantly. The first king caught the strike barehanded. Black fire and blue sparks erupted through the chamber. Dragons roared overhead. The palace began collapsing around them. And in the center of the chaos, Elara realized something terrifying. The prophecy had never warned that she would choose to kill Kylith. It warned that loving her might someday make him willing to die. The shattered throne room became a battlefield of fire and falling stone. Kylith and the first king collided again, with enough force to split the remaining obsidian pillars apart. Black dragon fire tore through the chamber ceiling as ancient claws crashed against enchanted steel. Every strike echoed through the palace like thunder. But Kylith was losing. Elara saw it immediately, not because he lacked strength, because the thing wearing the face of the first king no longer fought like a mortal creature. The ancient corruption twisting through his immortal blood had turned him into something unnatural, half dragon, half curse, sustained by centuries of rage and endless life. The monster caught Kylith by the throat and hurled him through the broken throne platform, hard enough to crack marble walls. The court screamed. Several guards rushed forward. The first king burned them alive, without looking. Elara's stomach twisted violently. The smell of blood and ash flooded the chamber. Outside the palace, dragons circled lower now, roaring in agitation as though they felt the corruption spilling from beneath the mountain. Kylith rose from the rubble, breathing hard. Black blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. The sight froze the entire room. The immortal king was bleeding. The first king smiled slowly. You inherited weakness from your mother. Kylith's expression changed instantly. Not fear. Murder. He attacked again with terrifying speed. This time black dragonfire erupted fully from his body, engulfing the shattered throne room in violent heat. His eyes burned molten gold as dragon scales spread briefly across his throat and arms. Elara stared in shock. Kyleth had been hiding it. His own corruption. The dragon curse beneath his skin was progressing faster than anyone knew. The first king laughed as they clashed again. There he is. The chamber walls exploded outward from the impact. Several counselors fled, screaming into the corridors. Others dropped to their knees, praying. Seraphine remained near the broken throne, perfectly still, despite the destruction around her, watching everything with cold calculation. Then, Elara realized something horrifying. The first king was not trying to kill Kyleth quickly. He was provoking him, pushing the dragon curse further out of control. Elara realized it too. "My king," the priestess shouted. "Do not fully shift." "Too late," Kyleth roared. The sound was not entirely human anymore. Black scales erupted across one side of his face, before slowly retreating again beneath skin. The court recoiled in terror. Elara's heart stopped. Now she understood why he feared himself. Why he feared the bond. The corruption inside dragon blood was already consuming him. The first king grinned viciously. "You feel it, don't you? The madness finally reaching your bones?" Kyleth drove his blade directly through the creature's chest. The monster barely reacted. Instead, it leaned closer. "You are becoming me." The words struck harder than the sword. Kyleth froze for one fatal second. The first king slammed him across the chamber with enough force to shatter another pillar. Elara ran toward him instinctively. "Kyleth." The name escaped before she could stop it. The entire room heard. Kyleth looked up from the rubble sharply. Something raw moved through his expression at the sound of his name on her lips. Then the first king turned toward her and smiled. "There it is," he whispered. "The bond completes beautifully through fear." Blue fire erupted around Elara instantly. Not from anger, terror, because suddenly she understood the creature's true goal. Not merely escape. He wanted Kyleth to lose control completely. If the Dragon King fully surrendered to the corruption inside him, the kingdom would fall into dragon madness permanently, and Elara's blue fire was the only thing capable of stopping it. The prophecy was never about conquest. It was about mercy. The realization hit her so violently she nearly staggered. The first king began walking toward her through the burning throne room. "Do you know what immortality truly becomes, child?" Kyleth rose again behind him, breathing unevenly. "Pain," the monster answered himself softly. "Endless centuries of hunger and rage, until even love rots into violence." Blue burned scars across his chest smoked beneath Elara's flames. "You think the throne hunted your bloodline out of fear?" He laughed quietly. "No, they hunted your queens because we needed them." Elara froze. The creature's molten eyes softened into something almost tragic. The blue flame queens purified dragon corruption. His voice lowered. "Without them, immortality became poison." The chamber went still. Kyleth stopped moving. The truth settled across the ruined throne room like ash. The throne had exterminated the very bloodline, keeping dragonkind sane, and now the kingdom itself was dying from that choice. The first king looked toward Kyleth again. "Tell her how long you have left." Silence. Elara turned slowly toward Kyleth. He said nothing, which terrified her instantly. The monster smiled cruelly. "Ah, so the great ash crown hid that from her too." "Enough," Kyleth growled. But Elara already saw the truth in his face. The exhaustion, the pain, the way his hands trembled slightly when the dragon curse surged beneath his skin. "How long?" she whispered. Kyleth looked away. The first king answered for him. The corruption already reached his heart. The chamber seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "No." Kyleth's silence confirmed everything. Elara closed her eyes in visible grief. Seraphine stared at Kyleth in shock. Even she had not known. The first king laughed softly. "Every dragon king eventually becomes monstrous. The corruption always wins in the end." Elara felt suddenly cold despite the fire around her. Kyleth had rejected her because he feared she would destroy him. But the truth was worse. He had believed he was already dying. And somewhere beneath all his fear, He had wanted to spare her from loving a monster. The realization shattered something inside her chest. The first king continued walking toward her slowly. Soon his dragon mind will consume what remains of the man. His molten gaze shifted toward Caleth, just as mine did. Caleth attacked again in fury. This time the first king barely defended himself, because the creature had already won the emotional wound he wanted. Elara could see it. Caleth's control was slipping. Every burst of dragon fire made the black scales spread further across his skin. The corruption was accelerating. Because of stress. Because of rage. Because of her. The bond between them suddenly pulsed violently again, and Elara felt it. His pain. Gosh, she felt all of it. The constant burning beneath his ribs. The fear of hurting people. The nightmares. The loneliness. The certainty that one day he would become a monster his kingdom would have to kill. Tears stung her eyes unexpectedly. Caleth staggered mid-strike as the bond surged between them. Their gazes locked across the burning throne room. And for one devastating moment, neither looked away. The first king saw everything. "You love him already," the creature murmured. Elara's breath caught sharply. Caleth's expression fractured. Not denial. Never denial. Because through the bond, they both knew the truth now. It had happened slowly. In glances. In restraint. In the moments he almost protected her before allowing himself to. In the way she stopped fearing him, before she understood why. The first king smiled darkly. Perfect. Then the monster lunged toward Elara. Caleth moved instantly. Faster than thought. He threw himself between them just as ancient claws tore through his armor. The sound of flesh ripping echoed through the ruined chamber. Elara screamed. The first king's claws pierced directly through Caleth's chest. Black blood splashed across the shattered throne floor. The entire court froze. Caleth staggered, but did not fall immediately. The monster leaned close enough to whisper into his ear. "You chose her exactly as I once chose mine." Then the first king ripped the claws free. Caleth collapsed. The world stopped. Elara reached him before anyone else. Blue fire exploded violently around her as she fell to her knees beside his body. Blood soaked her hands instantly. Too much blood. The dragon bond screamed through her chest like something tearing apart. Caleth looked up at her weakly through fading dragon eyes. Elara. Her vision blurred. "No." Her voice broke. No, stay with me." The black corruption beneath his skin spread rapidly now. The wound was too deep, even for immortality. The first king stepped backward slowly, satisfied. "There," he said softly. "Now choose." Blue fire spiraled around Elara uncontrollably. The chamber trembled. Dragons screamed across the capital. And suddenly, she understood the final horror of the prophecy. Only blue flame could permanently destroy immortal corruption, which meant saving Caleth might require burning the dragon out of him forever, even if it killed the king she loved with it. Caleth's blood burned against Elara's hands. Not metaphorically, actually burned. Black dragon fire spread beneath his skin in violent veins, twisting upward from the wound in his chest like living corruption trying to consume what remained of the man beneath it. His breathing grew uneven instantly. Every exhale sounded sharper, more monstrous. The throne room descended into chaos around them. Guards shouted. Dragons screamed overhead. Stone continued collapsing from the palace ceiling. But Elara heard only Caleth struggling to breathe. "No," she whispered again, pressing trembling hands against the wound. Blue fire flickered uncontrollably around her fingers, reacting instinctively to the corruption tearing through him. "Please." Caleth grabbed her wrist weakly. His hand was already changing. Black scales spread slowly across his skin. "Elara." His voice fractured painfully. "Listen to me." "No, you have to." Tears blurred her vision. She hated herself for crying now, hated the helplessness clawing through her chest. She had survived years of humiliation without breaking. She had endured exile inside her own home, rejection before an entire kingdom, chains around her wrists. But this was different, because Caleth was looking at her not like a king, Not like a ruler protecting his throne, like a man terrified of leaving her behind. The first king watched from across the ruined chamber, with terrible calm. "This is how it always ends," the monster said quietly. "Love makes dragons weak." Kyleth tried to rise again despite the wound. Blood spilled from his mouth. Elara caught him before he collapsed fully. "Stop moving." A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. "You finally sound like a queen." The words shattered her, because even now, even dying, he still found ways to steady her fear. The corruption surged again violently. Kyleth arched in pain as black dragon fire erupted briefly across his body. Several nearby guards recoiled in terror. "Elara," Valora shouted over the chaos. "You must purify the corruption now." The first king laughed softly. "Careful, priestess. Blue flame purification destroys immortal dragon essence completely." The meaning struck the room instantly. Elara looked down at Kyleth in horror. If she used her full fire to save him, she might kill the dragon inside him forever. And without his dragon, would Kyleth even survive? The first king smiled cruelly. "That is the mercy your queens always offered us, death or cleansing." His molten gaze darkened. Most dragons preferred madness. Kyleth's grip tightened weakly around Elara's hand. His dragon eyes flickered wildly between molten gold and black corruption now. "Elara," he said quietly, fighting for control with every word. "If I lose myself, no. You must stop me. No." His voice broke harder this time. "Please." The plea nearly destroyed her, because this was the truth he had carried alone all these years. Not fear of death, fear of becoming a monster no one could save. The bond between them pulsed violently again, and suddenly Elara saw everything. Not vision, memories. Kyleth standing alone after executions he could not prevent as a child. Kyleth killing his uncle for trying to unleash corrupted dragons against civilians. Kyleth refusing every potential mate, because the prophecy convinced him loving anyone would destroy them. Kyleth watching his own dragon curse spread slowly through his blood year after year. And beneath all of it, the terrible loneliness of a king raised to believe he would someday need to die for his kingdom. Elara's chest shattered under the weight of it. "You idiot," she whispered through tears. Kyleth blinked weakly. "You carried this alone." His expression cracked. The first king snarled suddenly. "Enough." The monster lunged toward them again. This time Elara reacted instinctively. Blue fire exploded outward from her body. The entire throne room vanished beneath silver-blue flames. The first king roared as the fire struck him full force. Ancient corruption burned visibly beneath his scales as he staggered backward for the first time. Not injured, terrified. The chamber shook violently. Every dragon outside the palace answered her fire with deafening roars. Elara rose slowly to her feet. Blue flames spiraled around her like living wings now. The room stared in stunned silence. Not because she looked monstrous, because she looked royal. Ancient glowing marks spread across her skin in delicate patterns of silver-blue fire. The broken dragons carved into the throne room walls began glowing in response. The Blue Flame Queen was awakening completely. The first king backed away instinctively. "No," he hissed. Elara looked at him, and for the first time all night, she was no longer afraid. "You murdered my bloodline," she said quietly. Blue fire cracked across the ruined floor. "You poisoned your own kingdom." The monster roared and attacked again. Elara raised one trembling hand. The blue fire answered instantly. Chains of living flame erupted around the first king's body, locking him in place mid-lunge. The ancient monster screamed as corruption burned beneath his scales. The entire throne room watched in disbelief. Not domination. Purification. The blue flame was not destroying him. It was stripping the corruption from his immortal blood. The first king convulsed violently. Black dragon fire poured from his body, like poison, leaving a wound. And suddenly, for one brief moment, the monster became human again. The room went silent. The ancient king collapsed to one knee, scales retreating partially beneath burned flesh. His molten eyes faded into exhausted amber. He looked old suddenly. Ancien. Broken. He stared at Elara in shock. Then, slowly, painfully, tears filled his eyes. Her fire, he whispered hoarsely. It feels warm again. The chamber froze. Caliph stared too, breathing unevenly from the floor. Because for the first time in centuries, someone had survived blue flame purification. The first king looked toward Caliph weakly. I did not remember. His voice cracked. What peace felt like. Then the corruption surged back violently. The monster screamed. Black scales exploded across his body again. The chains of blue fire began cracking apart. Elara went pale. Elara, he's too corrupted. The first king roared in agony. You cannot save us all. The chains shattered. The monster surged upward again, larger, more unstable, consumed completely by dragon madness now. The palace ceiling exploded open above them as dragons screamed across the storm-dark sky. The first king spread ruined wings through the throne room, and Elara finally understood. Some corruption had lived too long to heal. The creature lunged toward Caliph. Not Elara. Caliph. The Dragon King tried to rise despite his mortal wound, black fire erupting wildly around him. Too slow. The first king's claws descended, and Elara stepped between them. Time stopped. Caliph's eyes widened in horror. Elara, blue fire, erupted from her entire body. Not wild, controlled, beautiful. The flames formed a massive silver-blue dragon behind her, made entirely of living fire. The entire palace shook. Every dragon in the capital bowed instantly. The first king froze. Recognition flashed across his ruined face. Then Elara spoke words she did not consciously know. Ancient words. Queen's words. Be at peace. The blue dragon fire struck the first king directly through the chest. Silence swallowed the throne room. The corruption stopped moving. The monster stared at Elara with fading molten eyes. And slowly, very slowly, the rage left him. For the first time in centuries, the first Dragon King looked relieved. Then his body dissolved into silver ash. Gone. The throne room fell silent except for the sound of collapsing fire around them. Elara stood trembling in the center of the ruins as blue flames slowly faded from her skin. Then Caliph collapsed completely behind her. Her heart stopped. She turned instantly, falling beside him again. The corruption inside him had spread further during the battle. Black scales covered part of his throat now. His breathing weakened rapidly. Elara rushed forward at last. Elara, the priestess whispered urgently. The purification must happen now. Fear crashed through her chest again, because this time there would be no avoiding the choice. To save Caliph, she would have to burn the dragon curse out of him completely, even if it destroyed the immortal king forever. The ruined throne room stood silent beneath the storm. Ash drifted through broken ceilings like gray snow, while dragons circled above the shattered palace towers, their roars quieter now, mourning instead of rage. The first king was gone. The corruption poisoning the throne for centuries had finally fallen. But Caliph was still dying. Elara knelt beside him in the center of the ruins, while black dragon fire spread steadily beneath his skin. Every breath sounded weaker, more painful. The immortal healing that once closed wounds instantly now fought against corruption too deep to contain. The court watched from a distance in terrified silence. No one dared approach, because the entire kingdom suddenly balanced on what the blue flame queen chose next. Elara crouched beside Elara carefully. There is little time. Elara's hands trembled against Caliph's chest. If I purge the dragon fire, the priestess lowered her eyes. You may destroy the immortal bond keeping him alive. The words hollowed the air from Elara's lungs. Caliph opened his eyes, slightly then. Molten gold flickered weakly beneath black corruption. Elara. His voice barely carried. She leaned closer immediately. I'm here. A faint breath escaped him that almost sounded like relief. The sight nearly broke her. The Dragon King of ash and fire. The ruler who terrified entire kingdoms looked at her now like she was the only thing anchoring him to the world. Kyleth's hand lifted weakly toward her face. She caught it instantly. His fingers were cold. Elara. His breathing shuddered painfully. You must let me go. No. The answer came so fast it startled even her. A weak, almost smile touched his mouth. Still stubborn. Tears burned behind her eyes again. I spent my entire life surviving things alone, she whispered. I am not surviving this without you. Something inside Kayla's expression cracked completely then. Not the king. The man beneath him. The bond surged painfully between them. And suddenly, Elara felt his fear. Not death. Never death. Leaving her. The realization shattered her heart. Around them, the council remained frozen in silence. Even Seraphine stood motionless near the broken throne, watching the scene unfold with unreadable eyes. The northern commander finally stepped forward carefully. My queen. Elara looked up sharply. I am not your queen. The commander held her gaze calmly. Every dragon in the capital bowed to you tonight. Elara's voice trembled with exhaustion. That does not mean I know how to save him. No one answered, because no one truly knew. Violora touched Elara's shoulder gently. The blue flame has always been both destruction and restoration. The queen's purified corruption through emotional bonds. Elara frowned faintly through tears. What does that mean? The priestess looked toward Kyleth. It means your fire answers love more strongly than power. Silence followed. Then Seraphine laughed softly. Not cruelly. Bitterly. Of course it does. The room turned toward her. For the first time all night, the noblewoman no longer looked poised or untouchable. Smoke stained her crimson gown. Ash covered her hands, and beneath the sharp elegance of her face lived a grief she could no longer hide. She stepped slowly toward Kyleth. The guards hesitated. Kyleth looked up weakly, dragon eyes dimming. Seraphine. She stopped, several feet away from him. I spent years believing if I became perfect enough, powerful enough, loyal enough. Her voice tightened briefly. You would eventually love me. Silence settled heavily across the ruined throne room. Elara realized then that Seraphine had never merely wanted the crown. She had wanted him, and somehow that made everything sadder. Seraphine looked toward Elara slowly. I hated you before I even understood why. A faint bitter smile crossed her lips. You walked into the palace, carrying the one thing he never gave anyone else. Elara swallowed painfully. What? Seraphine's eyes flicked toward Kyleth. Fear. Kyleth closed his eyes briefly. Seraphine continued quietly. Kyleth Draven never feared losing anything. Her voice cracked faintly. Until you. The truth struck the room silent, because everyone had seen it tonight. The Dragon King feared prophecy, corruption, rebellion, but he feared Elara's death more. Seraphine inhaled slowly before looking toward Violora. Tell her the truth. The priestess hesitated, then finally spoke. The blue flame purification requires complete emotional surrender between bonded souls. Elara frowned slightly. Violora's expression darkened. The queens did not merely heal dragons through magic. Her gaze shifted toward Kyleth. They bound themselves emotionally to the corruption they cleansed. Understanding hit Elara slowly. Then all at once. If I purge the corruption, her breath caught sharply. I feel what he feels. Violora nodded once. Everything. The chamber fell silent. Kyleth tried to push himself upright weakly. No. Black fire erupted briefly beneath his skin again. He grimaced in pain. Elara, you cannot. She turned toward him sharply. You carried this alone for years. His jaw tightened. And now you want to die alone too? Elara, no. Blue fire flickered softly around her hands now. Not violent. Varm. The dragons outside quieted further. Listening. Kyleth stared at her with visible panic for the first time since she had met him. Not fear for himself. For her. The bond between them pulsed again. And Elara suddenly understood what terrified him most. If she joined herself fully to his corruption, she would feel all his suffering, all the darkness he buried from the world, the loneliness, the rage, the centuries of dragon madness slowly poisoning his bloodline. He could survive pain, but not becoming the reason she suffered too. The realization filled her chest with something fierce and aching. She touched his face, carefully. Black scales covered part of his jaw now, and still he leaned instinctively into her hand. "Elara." His voice broke. "Please." She smiled through tears. "You asked me once if I feared you." Kyleth looked at her silently. "I don't." The words shattered whatever control remained inside him. Elara felt it instantly through the bond. Love. Rough. Terrified. Absolute. The entire room felt the shift in the air. Even the dragons outside roared softly in response. Seraphine closed her eyes briefly, like someone finally accepting defeat. Elara leaned forward slowly, until her forehead rested against Kyleth's. Blue fire spread gently between them. The throne room vanished. Suddenly she was inside him. Not physically. Emotionally. The dragon curse hit her like drowning. Pain beyond imagination crashed through her chest, centuries of inherited corruption, endless violence buried inside immortal blood, rage forced into every dragon king generation after generation. Elara gasped sharply. Kyleth grabbed her immediately. "Stop." But she held on. Because beneath all the darkness, she found him. The boy who watched innocent people burn. The king who carried guilt like chains. The man who rejected his mate, because prophecy convinced him loving her would destroy her. And beneath all of it, the desperate aching need to be loved without fear. Elara broke. Not from horror, from understanding. Blue fire exploded around them both. The dragons outside screamed as the palace flooded silver-blue light. Kyleth cried out sharply as corruption ripped violently through his body. Black dragon fire poured from his wounds like poison being torn free. Elara felt all of it. Guts. The pain nearly destroyed her, but she held on tighter. "I see you," she whispered through tears. The blue flames surged brighter. Kyleth's body convulsed violently. Then suddenly the black scales began disappearing. The corruption retreated beneath his skin. The dragon madness burned away. The entire throne room watched in stunned silence, as immortal corruption, the curse, haunting the dragon throne for centuries, began dissolving inside blue fire. Kyleth gasped sharply. For the first time in years, the burning inside him stopped. He stared at Elara in shock. And then something impossible happened. The mate bond fully sealed. Not through domination, not through fate. Choice. A massive pulse of silver-blue fire erupted from them both and tore through the palace skies. Every dragon in the capital dropped to one knee. The storm clouds parted instantly. Moonlight flooded the ruined throne room. And in front of the entire kingdom, the Dragon King bowed his head to Elara Vale. No one in the throne room breathed. Moonlight poured through the shattered ceiling in pale silver rivers, illuminating ash, broken stone, and the kneeling form of the Dragon King before the woman he had once rejected. Kyleth Draven remained on one knee, not because magic forced him, not because prophecy demanded it, because he chose to. The entire court understood the difference instantly. A ruler like Kyleth did not kneel unwillingly. Evil. The silence stretched so long it became sacred. Elara stood trembling before him while the last traces of blue fire drifted slowly from her skin like glowing snow. The corruption that had darkened Kyleth's veins was gone. The black scales had vanished from his throat. Even the exhaustion crushing his face moments earlier had eased into stunned stillness. He looked free. The realization hit Elara almost harder than the mate bond itself. For the first time in his life, the Dragon King was no longer dying. Outside the palace, every dragon remained bowed across the capital towers. Thousands of people watched from the city below, and for the first time in 800 years, no dragon screamed in pain. The kingdom felt it. The peace. Vaelora slowly lowered herself to one knee first. Then the northern warriors. Then, several guards. The movement spread outward across the shattered throne room in waves. Some council members resisted. Others looked terrified, but more and more people bowed anyway. Not to conquest, to truth. Seraphine remained standing the longest. Her gaze stayed fixed on Caliph kneeling before Elara. Then, slowly, painfully, the noblewoman laughed once, under her breath. Not bitter this time. Broken. I spent years trying to become worthy of the throne, she whispered softly. And she healed it in a single night. Elara looked toward her carefully. For the first time, Seraphine looked tired, rather than cruel. The woman met her eyes. You know what happens next, don't you? Elara's stomach tightened. Because yes, she did. The kingdom would never return to what it was before tonight. Some houses would accept her. Others would rebel. The throne's lies had shattered publicly. The dragons had chosen openly, and Caliph had bowed before the entire court. Civil war still stood dangerously close. Caliph rose slowly to his feet. The room instinctively tensed. Not out of fear this time. Expectation. The Dragon King looked different now. Not weaker. Gotsno. Stronger somehow. The constant strain beneath his expression had vanished. The dragon fire inside his eyes no longer flickered violently between rage and exhaustion. For the first time since Elara met him, his power felt controlled rather than restrained. Alive, instead of cursed. Caliph looked toward the court, toward the broken throne, toward the nobles who had built generations of power upon lies. Then his gaze shifted finally to Seraphine. You knew the corruption was spreading. The noblewoman did not deny it. Yes, and still, you supported continuing the purges. Something sharp flickered through her eyes then. Buying. You think I wanted this kingdom to become monstrous? She asked quietly. My father died during a dragon madness outbreak when I was 13. Her voice tightened. I watched beasts tear through villages, while the throne called it necessary sacrifice. The room stayed silent, because suddenly Seraphine no longer sounded like a villain. Only another person shaped by fear. She looked toward Elara. The council taught us the blue flame bloodline nearly destroyed the world. A faint, bitter smile crossed her lips. So yes, I believed killing you would save it. Elara could not even hate her completely anymore. That hurt almost worse. Caliph's voice remained cold. And the assassins? The room shifted instantly. Seraphine froze. The silence answered everything. Caliph stepped toward her slowly. You sent them after her. Several guards moved immediately. Seraphine lifted one hand sharply. Stop. No one touched her. She looked directly at Caliph now, tears finally gathering in her eyes despite her composure. I thought if she died before the bond completed. Her voice cracked faintly. You would survive. Caliph stared at her without speaking. Seraphine laughed softly through tears. Pathetic, isn't it? No one answered. Because love had broken all of them differently tonight. She turned toward Elara then, and for the first time, there was no mask left. Only honesty. I truly did hate you. Her voice lowered. Not because you were weak, because he looked at you like losing you would destroy him. Elara's chest tightened painfully. Caliph moved slightly beside her. Closer. The mate bond pulsed warmly now instead of painfully between them. Alive. Seraphine inhaled shakily before straightening her posture one final time. The southern Red Fang clans will arrive before sunrise. Her eyes hardened again slightly. They will never accept a blue flame queen. Caliph's expression darkened. We know. No. Seraphine shook her head slowly. You don't. The chamber went still. The noblewoman looked toward Elara carefully. The Red Fang houses carry relic weapons forged specifically to kill blue flame blood. Fear slid coldly through Elara's stomach. Seraphine continued quietly. Your ancestors nearly wiped them out during the Hollow Wars. They have spent centuries preparing for your return. Outside the palace, dragons began roaring again, not violently, but warning. The Red Fang armies were close. The northern commander stepped toward Caliph. Our clans will defend the queen. Several counselors immediately objected. You would start civil war. It already started, the commander replied coldly. He was right. The kingdom had already divided. The only question remaining was whether it would survive what came next. Caliph turned toward the shattered throne slowly. The ancient black seat of House Draven stood cracked directly through the center from the battle. A symbol too obvious to ignore. The old throne was broken. Then Caliph did something no one expected. He walked past it. The chamber watched in stunned silence as the Dragon King stopped instead before the ruined palace windows overlooking the capital. Dragons covered the towers beyond. Hundreds now. Waiting. Watching. Caliph's voice carried through the throne room quietly. My father built this kingdom through fear. No one interrupted. We buried truth. Slaughtered bloodlines. Chained dragons. His jaw tightened slightly. And called it stability. Elara felt the entire room listening. Not merely to a king, to a man finally speaking honestly. Caliph turned slowly back toward the court. The age of the Ash Throne ends tonight. Shock rippled instantly through the chamber. Several elders looked horrified. Elara closed her eyes like someone hearing a prophecy fulfilled. Caliph extended his hand toward Elara. Not commandingly. Openly. A choice. Her heart stuttered painfully. Then she stepped toward him. The moment her hand touched his, the dragons outside roared as one. The sound shook the mountains. Caliph looked at her with something terrifyingly soft in his eyes now. Not obsession. Not possession. Devotion. Earned painfully enough to feel real. You once asked if I felt the bond, he said quietly. Elara remembered. The chains. The rejection. His warning. That is why you should fear me. Now his thumb brushed lightly across her knuckles. I did, he admitted softly. From the first moment. Emotion tightened painfully in her throat. Caliph lowered his forehead gently against hers. And I have been losing every battle against it, ever since. The confession shattered the last wall inside her chest. Elara laughed weakly through tears. Good, she whispered. For the first time in years, Caliph smiled fully. The entire throne room froze at the sight, because their terrifying king looked suddenly, impossibly human. Then the palace horns sounded from the outer walls. War horns. The Red Fang armies had arrived. The moment shattered instantly. Caliph's expression hardened back into command. The Dragon King returned. But not the same king. Never the same king. He turned toward the gathered court. If the Red Fang houses want war, he said coldly, they will face dragons united for the first time in centuries. Blue fire flickered softly through Elara's veins. Not destructive. Steady. The dragons outside answered with thunderous roars. And beneath the storm-dark sky of a kingdom on the edge of rebirth, the Blue Flame Queen stood beside the man who once rejected her, ready to burn the old world down together.